Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the real life of a medieval princess. Not the fairy tale kind with glass slippers and birds helping you get dressed. No, this is the kind where you're more political chess piece than pampered darling. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what time is it, and what city are you watching from? I always love seeing how far this little storytelling circle reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The room you're born in smells like beeswax, boiled linen and blood. There's a fire sputtering in the hearth, not nearly enough to warm the thick stone walls, but enough to make the air sticky. You're not the first child of the household, but you are the first daughter of the house of someone. Some powerful, noble family with too many syllables and a coat of arms involving lions, roses, and at least one sword. You don't cry at first. That worries everyone. Then you let out a howl that could crack a stained glass window, and the midwife mutters something about strong lungs and stronger destiny. You're swaddled in soft velvet trimmed with rabbit fur. Not because you'll remember any of this, of course, but because a procession of old men will soon come in to examine you. More like inspecting a new horse than greeting a newborn. Someone draws up a document. Your birth is already a matter of record. It's less, welcome to the world, and more, welcome to the game board. Your mother is pale, exhausted, but gives a sharp nod when told it's a girl. She knew. The court astrologer said the stars aligned for a daughter. Not a blessing, not a curse. Something more complicated and dangerous. You're given a name that isn't chosen for beauty or tradition. It's calculated. The name of your mother's formidable grandmother, a princess who once commanded a siege from behind a curtain. It's meant to evoke memory, loyalty, and fear, in that order. Meanwhile, the men are already in another chamber talking marriage prospects. Not for now, obviously. You're minutes old. But your bloodline makes you eligible for a future treaty with at least 4 neighbouring houses and one coastal kingdom that has too many fish and not enough daughters of its own. Your crib is made of carved oak and draped with embroidered linens, but you're not sleeping in the grand chamber. Oh no! You're carried down to the nursery in the eastern wing, far from the royal bedrooms. Out of sight mostly. There's less worry you'll be stolen by fae or assassins in the night this way. Probably. You spend your first days not in your mother's arms, but in the embrace of a nursemaid named Halda. She has arms like tree branches and a singing voice, with more lullaby in it than logic. She smells like goat's milk and cloves, and you instantly decide she's your favourite person in the world. Halda talks to you constantly. She tells you things she probably shouldn't. Like how the last princess born in this castle didn't live past her first winter. Or how the kitchens are already preparing a special tart in your honour, laced with saffron imported through 2 wars and 1 truce. She shows you the world, one draughty hallway at a time. She points to tapestries and mutters, "That one lies." She holds your tiny hand up to sunlight as if testing your aura for queenliness. You fail. She chuckles. At night you sleep in a cradle surrounded by carved saints and a single crude wooden rabbit with 1 ear. A relic from Halda's own childhood. She says it keeps dreams from turning into nightmares. You believe her. Downstairs your father is holding a feast. Boar, wine, dancing, all for your birth. He's smiling, but not because he's thrilled to have a daughter. He's smiling because this daughter, you, will be his newest political tool. The wine he raises in your name is a toast, yes, but it's also a signal. Let the bargaining begin. Meanwhile, your mother's lying in bed staring at the ceiling, already calculating how to raise you right. Not lovingly, strategically. She was once you. She knows what's ahead. Her mind is a tapestry of alliances, betrayals, titles, dowries. She knows she has 10, maybe 12 years to shape you into someone the world won't eat alive. And here's the fringe fact no one will ever confirm out loud. A lock of your hair is cut in secret that very first night, placed into a sealed vial with a scrap of your blooded swaddling cloth and hidden beneath a loose flagstone. Some say it's a ward against evil. Others say it's so you can be identified if you're ever kidnapped. The truth? That depends on which servant you ask, and how much you pay them. There's a scholarly debate that still circles among dusty historians. Were noble daughters in the early Middle Ages truly seen as assets from birth? Or did this political awareness develop later, as dynastic wars made them more visibly valuable? The answer depends on your definition of value. But one thing's clear. You were born into a role, not into a childhood. By your second week of life, you've already been offered in theoretical marriage to a boy in Navarre, another in Brittany, and a third in the icy north whose name sounds more like a sneeze than a title. Your fate is being measured in miles, ships and bloodlines, and you haven't even grown teeth yet. Still, you're warm, you're fed, you're alive. And in this century, that already makes you a rare success story. Halder wraps you in a fresh blanket, sets you by the hearth, and hums something old and wordless. You sleep, not peacefully, but solidly. Outside, snow starts to fall, the first of the season. A bad omen, someone says, but Halder just mutters, "It'll keep the wolves from the door." She doesn't say which kind. The day you open your eyes long enough to track movement, Halder claps her hands and declares, "She's watching. That's the clever kind of dangerous." From then on, everyone speaks in softer tones around you. Not because they're trying to be gentle, but because they assume, somehow, you're listening. Which, to be fair, you kind of are. You're handed from servant to servant like a particularly valuable loaf of bread. But Halder is the constant. She feeds you, sings to you, cleans you, and smacks your hand away when you get curious about things like candle flames or shiny brooches. She doesn't coddle, and she doesn't baby talk. She tells you real things. Things like, your uncle tried to poison your father once, but he used too much sage and the cook noticed. Or, don't stare at the priest too long, he'll think you're possessed. The other nursemaids say she's touched in the head. But Halder knows things, old things, things that shouldn't make sense to you but somehow do. She tells you stories at night, not fairy tales. Those are for merchant daughters. You get the real stuff. A princess who married a Viking and vanished into the sea. A girl who turned into a tree to escape a king's hand. A noble child swapped with a changeling and returned as an old woman with goat's eyes. You try not to blink during these tales, as if your eyelashes might interrupt the spell. By the time you're 3, you speak in full sentences, mostly questions. Why does the bishop smell like wine? Why does the tapestry have 7 lions but only 6 legs? Why does no one look at the queen when she cries? No one answers you directly. They smile too wide and offer you honeyed plums, or pretend you didn't speak at all. Halder just winks. She loves that you notice. You're her little observer. By 4, you're mobile in every sense. You toddle, sprint and escape. You learn to disappear through the wide hallways, slip behind velvet curtains, and even wedge yourself beneath the long banquet table to spy on feet and whispers. You discover that adults say their truest things when they think children aren't listening. You collect secrets the way other girls collect dolls. Your favourite hiding spot is behind the library's southern tapestry, the one with the battle scene where no one's actually bleeding. A ridiculous omission, even to your tiny eyes. From here, you can hear the scholar and your father argue about books written in Arabic, and whether it's proper to let a girl touch them. The answer is no, of course, but the scholar coughs when he says it, like the idea is dust in his mouth. Some afternoons you're brought into the nursery with your cousins, noble children from other branches of the family tree, twigs really. There's a boy who throws everything, and a girl who cries when she's not in charge. You don't like them. You try to make them laugh by pretending to be a dog, but you bark too realistically, and the girl screams. She tattles. You get scolded. Halder mutters, "Well, at least she's got bite." And then come the games. Oh, the games. There's Peasant Queen, where you make the chambermaid pretend to be your subject while you issue absurd commands. Bring me a goat dressed in lavender. Find me a river that flows backward. There's Executioner, where you and the stable boy take turns condemning ants to death by thimble. And there's the one your mother hates most, Castle Siege, which involves constructing a small fort of pillows and charging it with sharpened sticks from the garden. Eventually someone snitches. You're punished by having your playtime revoked, which only teaches you to play smarter. That's when you find the North Tower. It's not locked, which means it's not considered dangerous, which means someone's underestimating you. You climb it, slowly, cautiously, one cold stone step at a time. The higher you go, the louder the wind becomes. At the top is a room used only for storage. Rusted weapons, chipped statues, and old gowns sealed in trunks. It smells like dust, dried lavender, and rust. You love it instantly. Here, you build your kingdom. Your throne is a broken chair draped in a tapestry of horses. Your crown is a bent circlet once used in a masquerade. You appoint Halder as your general, the cook's son as your jester, and a moth-riddled tunic as your royal enemy. No one knows about this place, which means it's yours. This is also where Halder finally gives you her secret name, the one she never tells anyone. "For power," she whispers. "Names are power. Now you know mine. Keep it. Use it only if you must." You nod solemnly as if she's handing you a dagger. In a way she is. One day, during your secret kingdom hours, you find a scroll tucked behind a loose stone. Not hidden carefully, but not something meant for children either. It's covered in symbols you don't know. Latin, probably. But there's a sketch at the bottom. A woman in a crown standing over a battlefield. You trace it with your finger and feel a little shock, like touching cold iron. You don't tell anyone. You put it back, but now you know it's there. There's a strange debate among scholars about how much medieval children, especially noble girls, actually played. Some say it was all rigid training from the start, while others argue kids were left to their own mischief until about age 7. Judging by your bruised knees and ink-stained fingers, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. And now, the fringe bit. Halder insists you were born with a caul, a thin membrane over your face, which she took and buried under a hawthorn tree. She says it means you'll never drown, or that you'll see spirits, or maybe both. It depends on the phase of the moon and how much cider she's had. She won't say exactly where she buried it. Some magic's better left secret, she tells you with a wink. You believe her. So here you are, a 4-year-old whirlwind in velvet slippers, ruling a secret kingdom at the top of a forgotten tower, listening to gossip through floorboards, and learning the subtle power of silence. Your real lessons haven't even started yet, but you're already learning the most important rule of all. Watch everything. Say little. Remember everything. Because one day, you'll need it all. By the time you're 5, your limbs are all knobby elbows and unpredictable knees, and your mind runs faster than your tongue can keep up. The world is still too big for you, but you're learning how to wedge yourself into the corners of it. Quiet, unnoticed, observant. The castle becomes less of a mystery and more of a puzzle. You start memorizing which floorboards creak, which stairwells are always cold, and which guards can be bribed with sweetbread. You're allowed out into the courtyard more often now, not alone, of course. A tightly organised escort, 2 maids, a page, and Halder trailing close behind, shuffle along as you totter across the flagstones in shoes so impractical they may as well be hooves. The stones are worn smooth by generations of royal boots and horse hooves. You're not supposed to run, but you do anyway. Not out of rebellion, just joy. One day, you try to chase a goose. The goose is not amused. It hisses and flaps, and you're tackled by your nursemaid before any serious blood is drawn. Halder laughs about it for weeks, calling it the Battle of the Goose Gate. Still, the bruises heal, the laughter fades, and slowly the games change. Play becomes structured. Lessons creep in, disguised as fun. A kindly-looking tutor named Brother Meron appears one morning with ink-stained hands and a wheezy cough, carrying scrolls that smell like mildew and regret. He smiles and tells you, "Let's begin with Latin," as if it's a toy, as if it's something you want and you don't, but you learn it anyway. Latin, French, and a bit of your local dialect, which your mother insists is vulgar and only fit for fishwives. You learn your prayers, of course, in both Latin and the proper court tongue, because piety isn't optional, and you'll need it memorized in case of plagues, war, or public execution. You also learn deportment, the art of not moving, not slouching, not speaking unless asked, sitting on a hard bench with your spine straight as a sword. You're told to walk with grace, to hold your hands like doves resting in your lap, to never scratch an itch in public, even if it's behind your ear and begging for attention. The best princesses are statues, apparently. Halder calls it the art of surviving without screaming. She's not wrong. There are drawing lessons too, sewing, embroidery and weaving, skills meant to pass the time, show refinement, and leave a delicate trail of artistry behind you. Your stitches are clumsy at first, crooked little worms curling across the linen, but you improve, you're meticulous, and more importantly, patient. When you're 6, you're introduced to the Book of Hours, a lavishly illustrated tome filled with saints, angels, devils, and endless golden filigree. You're told to study it every morning. You pretend to do so with deep reverence, while in truth you count how many angels are barefoot. The one thing you're not taught, of course, is how to wield a blade. Your cousin, the boy one, gets fencing lessons in the courtyard, swinging his practice sword like he's battling giants. You watch through a slit in the wall, imagining how heavy the sword must be, how the hilt would feel in your hands. You ask once, just once, if you can try. Your mother is scandalized. Your father laughs. Halder just sighs and mutters, "Too bad, you've got a fighter's face." There's another kind of lesson you start learning around this time, subtle, unspoken. You begin to notice the glances, not just from the household staff, who go rigid when you enter a room and bow as though they expect you to pass judgment on their very souls, but from strangers at court, visiting nobles, minor lords, men with teeth like polished stones and daughters of their own. Their gazes linger a little too long. You're 6. You don't understand it yet, not really, but you feel it. That strange weight of being looked at, assessed, valued. Not as a child, as a currency. Halder notices it too. She starts dressing you differently. Less embroidery, more wool, less silk, more grey. Your hair, once brushed into elaborate braids, is now tied back plainly. When you ask why, she says, "Let them forget you for a bit. Be a shadow, not a jewel." You don't argue. You've learned to trust her. There's a famous, and still debated, piece of medieval commentary from a chronicler who insisted noble girls were raised neither in innocence nor indulgence, but in performance. Some modern scholars argue this was an exaggeration, that noble girls were still children first, pampered and loved. Others claim it was an accurate portrayal, life as a never-ending rehearsal for adulthood, marriage, and motherhood. Neither side can quite prove it, but you're living it, so you don't need footnotes. One day, you're invited to sit in on a formal dinner, not as a guest, but as a presence. You're not supposed to speak. You're to sit, smile, and eat only what's served directly to you, which is unfortunate because what's served is something grey, gelatinous, and still twitching. You sit beside your cousin and try not to gag while he loudly discusses the training habits of his falcon. Across the table, your father's steward tries to engage you in a riddle. You know the answer, but you stay silent. You're not here to be clever, you're here to be seen. That's the game. Later that night, your mother praises you for your quiet dignity. Your father claps your shoulder and mutters, "She'll make a fine treaty someday." Treaty, not woman, not child, not even bride. Treaty. There's a fringe belief in some courts that a girl child born under a waning crescent moon will always be an omen of change, either the rise of a house or its complete collapse. Halda won't say which you are, just that your arrival came with a red comet in the sky, and those never mean something dull, you believe her. So now your days are filled with stiff chairs and slow, aching handwriting. You know your psalms, your manners, and the approximate price of a modest dowry for someone of your bloodline. Your games are still games, but now they come with rules, protocols, scripts. You walk softer, you speak less. But your eyes are wide open. You're 7 the first time you were asked to lie. Not in a casual, childish way. Not, "Did you eat that honey cake?" Or, "Did you take the kitchen cat into the chapel again?" No, this one comes dressed in silk and smells like rose oil and danger. It's your mother. She sits you down in her private chamber where the fireplace glows a little too hot for comfort and the air smells like cinnamon and wax. She's wearing her best gown, the one with the embroidered silver leaves that catch the light when she moves, and when she smiles at you, it's not warm, it's expectant. "There's a noble woman visiting from Aragon," she says, gently adjusting your sleeve. Well, her husband owns ports, and her son is just a year older than you. You don't say anything. You've learned to let adults fill in their own silences. "She'll be watching you," your mother continues, "judging. You are to make her think you're the brightest, gentlest, most pious little creature God ever placed on earth." You frown. That doesn't sound like you. She's going to ask you about your lessons. Say you study scripture every day and adore Latin. You do not adore Latin. If she asks about music, you love the harp. You loathe the harp. It pinches your fingers and the sound reminds you of bees trapped in glass. And if she asks if you want to marry a foreign prince someday, you say... She pauses. "Yes, of course," you finish deadpan. Your mother smiles and for a moment it almost looks genuine. "Good girl." The visit goes smoothly. You lie like a professional. The noble woman gives you a sapphire brooch shaped like a flower and calls you such a sweet thing. Later, Halda polishes the brooch and mutters, "Hope she doesn't ask for it back once she hears what you said about her hat." That's the beginning of the performance. From now on, your life becomes a dance of polished words and pleasant nods. Every feast, every audience, every little walk in the gardens with a visiting dignitary becomes a test you can't afford to fail. You're a walking display window trimmed with lace and filled with carefully memorized lines. Your tutors begin rotating more quickly. There's a sense of urgency now. A French woman arrives to teach you pronunciation so sharp it could slice a roast. A court musician comes to train your ear. A priest begins lessons in moral theology, which is code for how not to make enemies in confession. You're 7, the same age as your cousin was when he got his first dagger. You get a prayer book. But you're quick, so you learn to play the game. You learn how to sit beside someone and ask them a question that sounds innocent but isn't. You learn how to act surprised when someone lies to your face. You learn how to thank someone for a gift they gave you just to make you owe them. One afternoon, during a lesson in needlework, you prick your finger. Not a little nick. A deep, ugly stab right into the meat of your fingertip. Blood wells up immediately. The other girls scream or gasp or pretend to faint depending on their mood. You say nothing. Just suck the blood off, pinch the wound closed and keep stitching. That night your embroidery tutor tells your mother she's unusually calm, perhaps worryingly so. Your mother beams. You overhear servants whisper that you're cold, that you never cry, that you look right through people. You're not sure if that's meant to be praise, but it feels useful, so you lean into it. There's a historical tidbit floating around in the dusty corners of medieval study circles. certain princesses were taught to emulate queens from legends, women of poise, wisdom, and terrifying silence. Think of Queen Melisande, ruling without a husband, or Eleanor of Aquitaine, who may or may not have plotted more than one assassination between childbirths. Girls like you were fed stories of saintly virgins and iron-hearted rulers and told to pick which they wanted to be. You, personally, would like to be both, maybe with a sword. Around this time, Hulda starts telling you darker stories, not bedtime tales. These come while brushing your hair or wrapping your shawl, or tucking dried rose petals into your sleeves to make you smell less like ink and more like someone's future bride. She tells you of the princess who was married at 10 and poisoned at 12, of the one who escaped her tower by bribing the cook with a ruby and a kiss, of the girl who simply disappeared and whose name became a curse whispered into chimneys. You always ask her the same thing. Are these true? She always says, they're true enough. There's a new game you like to play now, standing at the long windows of the West Hall and imagining how far you'd have to walk to disappear. Past the orchards, past the river, past the woods, over the hills. You imagine what your name would be if you weren't a princess. Something short, sharp, wild. Maybe you'd sell apples, or mend boots, or run a little inn where no one ever asks about your past. But then someone calls for you, a tutor, a maid, your mother, and the thought vanishes like breath in winter. One strange morning, a messenger arrives from the neighbouring kingdom. His arrival causes a flurry of activity. Kitchens roar to life, silver is polished, a fresh rush of lavender is thrown into the corridors to mask the ever-present smell of damp stone. You are summoned, you are presented. The messenger brings a gift, an ornate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a rose. It is, unmistakably, a token of interest, which means you are the gift being responded to. You thank him in perfect court French, curtsy without trembling, and smile just long enough to make it seem real. You're told afterward you did very well. That night Hulda finds you sitting in the window, the necklace beside you, untouched. I don't want to be married, you say quietly. She sits beside you, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Oh, darling, she says, voice gentle but unwavering. That was never part of the question. There's a fringe theory that noble daughters weren't fully considered human until they were betrothed, until they had a purpose, a target, a destination. Before that, they were just potential, dangerous potential. Which makes sense. Right now, you're becoming sharp enough to be considered useful, but not yet predictable. Your life is no longer your own, but you can still shape it, quietly. The lies you're learning to tell are your first weapons, and soon you'll need sharper ones. You don't remember your first betrothal clearly, but everyone else does. They bring it up like a beloved family story. You're 7, nearly 8, and the boy is 10, and everyone keeps insisting you'll make a lovely match, as if you're 2 pieces of furniture that look nice in the same room. His name is Alaric. You meet him once. He arrives with an entourage of armoured men, an older sister who looks like she wants to bite someone, and a falcon he won't stop bragging about. He bows to you stiffly, doesn't make eye contact, and offers you a polished walnut in a silver box. It's unclear whether this is meant to be a gift or a joke. You say thank you sweetly, then later give the walnut to the castle cat, who sniffs it once and walks away in disgust. It feels metaphorical. The betrothal is announced during a feast, right after the venison and right before the pears stewed in wine. Your name and his are spoken together like one long, awkward sentence. You sit very still, smiling just enough. You're congratulated by people you've never seen before. Someone pinches your cheek. Someone else gives you a prayer card with your names written in calligraphy, as if that makes it real. Hulda leans over and murmurs, "Don't worry, princess. First betrothals are like first pancakes, usually burned, occasionally edible, never the last." The real purpose of this little engagement isn't love, or even alliance, it's leverage. His family owns 2 border castles and 1 valuable salt mine. Yours owns passage through the mountains. The marriage would combine resources and frustrate a few enemies. Perfect. Alaric is tolerable, quiet, smells faintly of ink and sweat. He wears a dagger, but holds it like he's not sure which end is supposed to be dangerous. His smile is crooked and suspiciously close to a smirk. You share 1 dance at a midsummer celebration. It's awkward and brief. He steps on your foot once. You don't say anything, but he winces and apologizes the next day in a note delivered with a piece of marzipan shaped like a squirrel. You decide he's not terrible. Still a walnut, but maybe not rotten. For weeks, everyone treats you differently. Your tutors begin emphasizing wifely virtues. You're told to study how to manage a household, how to speak just enough, how to smile without inviting attention, how to pray like your soul depends on it. Because apparently it does. Your embroidery lessons shift too. Instead of birds and flowers, you're now stitching your initials alongside his, inside elaborate borders of vines and tiny lions. You hate it. And then one day the lessons stop. You notice first that your new dress, one sewn specially for the next visit from Alaric's family, is never delivered. Then the music teacher who was supposed to prepare you for the wedding celebration simply doesn't arrive. Finally, your mother calls you to her chamber and tells you very plainly the betrothal has been dissolved. No explanation, no apology, just dissolved, like sugar in hot wine. You blink. You feel nothing at first, just a faint flutter of confusion. Then, quietly, relief. Followed by something a little sharper, insult. "What happened?" you ask. His family found a better match, she says with a shrug. A girl with a larger dowry. A girl with more value. A better number on her price tag. You, apparently, were not enough. Your father is less diplomatic about it. Over supper, he mutters something about greedy vultures and salt-soaked idiots. Then he adds, "We'll do better." She's worth twice what they thought. And just like that, you're relisted, available, eligible, quietly repackaged for the next round. There's a curious footnote in a chronicle from the early 1300s that says noble girls were sometimes betrothed and unbetrothed 6 times before age 15, depending on whose fortunes rose or fell that month. Like property, but more fragile. Like promises, but more expendable. You now understand exactly how that works. After the betrothal ends, no one tells you what to feel, but everyone watches you closely, as if expecting tears or tantrums. You give them neither. Instead, you begin waking up earlier, reading longer, practicing your music with new ferocity. You double your efforts in your studies, and even start learning how to speak a few words of Greek, just to irritate your new tutor, who claims it's a useless language for a lady. Halda finds you stitching a falcon into a scrap of linen, its claws sunk into a serpent. She raises an eyebrow. Feeling dramatic, are we? You just smile, you're practicing. That's when you begin to hear whispers, real whispers, about your future. Names drift through hallways. A boy from the east with a crooked smile and a thriving trade route. A widower lord whose last wife took ill under mysterious circumstances. A merchant's son whose ships bring silk and spices and rumours. You listen, you remember, you wait. At night you lie in bed and count all the ways your life can be given away. 1, for land. 2, for money. 3, for a grudge. 4, for a favour owed. 5, for peace between people who will never love each other. Your mother finds you pacing in your chamber one evening. She doesn't ask what's wrong. She just says, "Stop wearing your feelings on your face. A useful girl knows when to be quiet." You say nothing. The next morning you wake up before dawn, press your lips together and walk into the day like a soldier. And here's the odd little fringe detail that survives in a few forgotten texts. Some royal families would burn the names of dissolved betrothals, as if purging them from memory. Ink and parchment turned to ash in a private ceremony. Sometimes the girl was made to watch. Sometimes she wasn't even told. You never saw your name burn, but you can feel the ash under your skin. The marriage didn't happen. That's the official story. But the performance? That was real. And now you know your role better than ever. You're not broken. You're rehearsed. You're 8 now, and the world outside the castle walls begins to creep into your carefully managed little life, like smoke through a cracked window. It starts with whispers. Then it turns into absences. First, it's your poetry tutor, who stops arriving after complaining of a cough. Then the page who sometimes brought you apple slices from the kitchens. Then the old cook with the bad knee who used to sneak you fried cheese during Lent. People start disappearing. At first, you think maybe they've been dismissed or reassigned. That's what your mother says when you ask, her voice clipped, distracted. The staff is being reorganized. But Halda's face is grave when you press her later. There's a sickness, she says softly. A bad one. The word plague is never spoken around you. You're still a child, technically, and children aren't supposed to carry that kind of word in their mouths. But you've read the Psalms. You know the phrases. Pestilence that walketh in darkness. 10,000 at thy right hand. You know enough to be scared. The castle changes. It becomes quieter, but not in the usual soft, wintry way. This is a brittle silence, like ice spread too thin. No more music drifting from the lower halls. No more clatter from the kitchens. The hearths still burn, but everything smells like vinegar and boiled herbs. Servants move around you with cloths tied around their faces. No one touches you unless absolutely necessary. Even Halda begins washing your hair with water so hot it stings your scalp, muttering prayers as she works. You're told not to leave your room without permission. You do, of course. Not far, just enough to listen. You crouch behind curtains and in stairwells and hear the voices of worried men. Your father's steward speaking of quarantine. The chaplain talking about divine punishment. Your mother saying that the Queen's second cousin has died. It's not just your castle. It's everywhere. The sickness is in the cities, in the villages, riding on rats and wind and cargo from faraway shores. Ships that never should have docked. Markets that should have been closed. Everything moves too fast now. You're told to pray, so you do. But the prayers feel heavy in your mouth like stones that don't belong to you. And then one morning you notice something else is missing. Your Latin tutor, Brother Maron. He was the one who always smelled like ink and honey and sighed dramatically every time you asked why nouns had genders. He hasn't come in 3 days. You ask Halda, she doesn't answer right away. He's gone, she says finally. Dismissed? No. There's a pause, then you ask, did he die? And Halda gives you a look that burns down into your bones. No one says it outright, but a kind of dread becomes part of your daily life. You eat alone. You bathe alone. Even your lessons are pared down to the essentials. Prayers, etiquette, quiet reading. Anything that can be done at safe distance. There's a strange, almost eerie power in watching your world grow smaller. And in this shrinking space, something shifts in you. You begin paying closer attention to the way adults speak when they're scared. How they use words like fate and God's will and cleansing to cover the trembling in their hands. How they still try to make you wear a new gown and braid your hair properly, even while the bells are tolling for someone you knew just last week. You start to wonder if decorum is just another kind of spell, something fragile people cast to keep the chaos at bay. There's a scholarly debate about how medieval noble families handled plague outbreaks, especially regarding their children. Some argue that noble kids were often removed from court and sent to rural estates to wait it out. Others believe they were kept in place, more for political security than safety, surrounded by carefully controlled circles of clean servants. You, lucky thing, get the second option. You don't leave. You're too valuable. You're a coin no one wants to drop. Your meals become even more elaborate. Lavender-scented broth, hard cheese from the north, dates imported from who knows where. Food as proof you're still important, food as ritual, food as denial. And then comes the procession, a small one, sombre. 2 black-draped carts pass through the courtyard while you watch from the window. No banners, no names called, just a priest walking ahead, whispering a litany. Halder closes the shutters. You don't cry. You don't even ask who's in the carts. You already know. One of the washerwomen, a guard, a page. You go back to your reading, and for the first time the ink on the page feels like something you can grip. You memorize lines from old texts like spells. You say them aloud while brushing your hair. You write them onto scraps of fabric and tuck them into the folds of your pillow. You start copying your favourite quotes into a secret book. Your book. It's plain, bound in rough leather, with nothing inscribed on the cover. You hide it in your chamber, beneath the panel in the floor Halder showed you back when your biggest worry was tripping over your hem. That night you wake up in a cold sweat. The shadows on the walls look like hands. You sit up, light a candle, and open your book. The quote you read is from Cicero. To live is to think. You don't know if that's true, but you want it to be. You write your own thought beneath it. To survive is to remember. The next morning, Halder tells you your dance lessons will resume, just in case a suitor visits unexpectedly. You laugh, a dry, bitter sound that surprises even you. No one's visiting, Halder, you say, your voice like stone. She doesn't argue. She just nods and says, then we'll make sure you're ready when they do. There's a fringe belief from a mountain monastery that surviving a plague grants you a kind of second soul, a deeper one stitched behind your ribs. The monks wrote that children who lived through it would either become saints or rulers. You think that's ridiculous. You're not a saint, and they're not going to let you rule. But maybe, just maybe, you'll find your own way around that. There's a feast, not a grand one. No minstrels piping songs from the battlements, or noblemen rolling in with hunting falcons perched on their arms, but a feast nonetheless. Roast duck, almond cream, and figs, platters lined in gold, candles flickering in tall holders that catch the stained glass glint just right. You sit at your usual place, third from the high table, in a stiff back chair with a cushion that doesn't quite reach your lower back. Your dress is midnight blue tonight, trimmed in tiny pearls, with sleeves so long you could trip someone with a single spin. You don't spin, obviously. Not here, not now. This feast isn't for you. It's for someone else. A visiting earl from the south, wrapped in heavy robes even though it's not cold, has come to pay respects to your family. But no one pays respects with 4 carts of spices and 2 jewellers in tow. No, this is courtship. In the most roundabout, gilded, overly scented way possible. And for the first time in months you're being watched again. The Earl's son, his name is Gerard, which sounds like someone sneezed into a handkerchief, smiles across the table. He's around your age, maybe a year older, with the kind of face that tries very hard to be handsome. Every time he talks, he smooths his hair behind one ear, as if making absolutely sure you've noticed how many ringlets he has. You notice. You're not impressed. After supper, there's music. A soft trio in the corner plays a courtly tune, and the dance floor is opened. Your name is called gently, too gently, and you are summoned forward. Your feet are sore from sitting too still. Your slippers are narrow, but you rise curtsy and take the boy's hand. Giraud smiles like he's won a prize pig at the autumn fair. The dance begins. You know this one. It's a slow turn, 3 steps and a bow, 3 steps and a twirl. Giraud nearly steps on you twice but recovers with flair, which means he's been taught how to fail gracefully. A useful skill in your world. As you move, you smile. Not because you feel joy, but because you're expected to. Because everyone is watching. Your parents, his parents, the steward, the court scribe who's already sketching the scene with charcoal smudges. You're not dancing, you're auditioning. Afterward he compliments your grace and asks if you play the lute. You lie, sweetly, and say yes. He tells you his favourite colour is green. You nod like it matters. You spend the rest of the evening under polite siege, being paraded to speak with his mother, his aunt, his other aunt. Why do they always come in pairs? And even his governess, who squints at you like she's trying to detect hidden flaws. Such a pretty girl, she says, as though beauty were your greatest achievement. That night you sit in your chamber while Hulda slowly unpins your hair. Well, she asks. He's a goose in boots, you mutter. She snorts. A rich goose. A boring goose. Even worse, she agrees. Still, she reminds you not to be too dismissive. Sometimes a boring goose can be safer than a sharp-eyed hawk. Then she adds, though it does help if he can dance. You roll your eyes. You've already heard your parents talking. This is the next plan. The next offer. Not formal yet, but they're watching to see if you fit. Like trying on a new pair of gloves, except you're the glove. And it hits you, quietly but thoroughly, that this might be the rest of your life. Dinners with strangers who smile too wide, dances that end in letters, letters that end in negotiations, and negotiations that end in you, sent away somewhere far with a man you might not even like, just because your signatures look good together. So you start to think about the only thing you can control, your appearance. You decide to use it like a weapon. The next morning you ask for sapphires. You don't wear them often. They're kept in the treasury, locked in a box that smells like cedar and ancient secrets. Your request raises eyebrows, but your mother allows it. After all, you're not a child anymore. The sapphires are set into a circlet, thin, sharp, heavy, and threaded into your hair. They catch the light in ways that make you look older, colder, a little too regal for someone not yet 9. You also request a new gown, midnight blue again, but this time with silver embroidery that trails like frost down the sleeves. When Gerard's family returns for a midday audience, you make your entrance, quietly, deliberately, and you watch as the adults sit up straighter. You watch as the boy fumbles his cup. You're no longer just pretty, you're dangerous. There's a fringe tradition in certain noble courts where girls are dressed in gemstones, not for beauty, but as a warning, like venomous frogs with bright markings. The message is simple. This one is rare, and not for casual handling. You walk through the chamber like a queen who forgot she doesn't have a throne yet. Later, your father pats your shoulder, a rare show of affection. Well done, he says. He was nearly speechless. Good. That's what you were aiming for, and yet behind all this silk and sparkle you're still a child. So when you sneak off to the garden that night, barefoot and with your hair unbraided, you do what children do best. You imagine. You lie in the grass, look at the stars, and try to picture a world where you choose, where marriage isn't something done to you, but something you reach out and take, or leave behind. You imagine becoming someone else, someone with no titles, no expectations, no sapphires digging into her temples. Just a girl in a field, barefoot, staring up at a sky that doesn't care who her father is. There's a soft wind. It smells like thyme and smoke. And for one brief moment you believe that version of your life might be possible. But then a bell tolls in the distance. Curfew. Time to go inside. You sit up, brush the dirt from your gown, and go back to being whoever they need you to be. The castle has more doors than people realise. Not just the grand ones carved with lions and saints, but the small hidden ones tucked behind tapestries or built into the base of spiral staircases. Servants use them. Spies prefer them. You, naturally, start to treat them as your private roadways. You first discover one by accident, chasing your cat, of course, who vanishes behind a curtain in the solar. You follow, tug it back, and there it is. A wooden panel, just slightly ajar, revealing a narrow stone passage that curves into darkness. It smells like dust, candle grease, and something older. You should turn back. You don't. You return later with a stub of candle and no cat, this time prepared. The corridor is tight but walkable. It slopes downward, then up, and eventually branches into several others. You pick one at random, counting your steps, noting how your slippers catch on uneven flagstones. It's silent, but not dead. You hear breathing, not your own, and the occasional echo of voices through the walls. It feels like walking inside the bones of the castle. You love it instantly. You learn, over weeks, where they all go. One leads to the kitchens, one to the chapel. One, your favourite, slips behind the council chamber, right between the stone wall and the wooden panelling, where you can crouch in silence and hear things you're very much not supposed to hear. And that's how you find out what they're planning. It's a cold morning. Frost on the windows, your breath visible even indoors. You sneak into the passage during a break in your lessons, still dressed in your thick red cloak, fingers tucked into the sleeves for warmth. Voices drift through the wall. They'll make the match before the winter feast, one says. It's your father's steward. Does the girl know? That's Lord Brand, your father's closest advisor, and a man who always smells like pickled onions. She doesn't need to. Not yet. That lands like a stone in your chest. They're discussing your next engagement. Again, without you. Again. And this time, it's real. You press your ear closer, the stone cold against your cheek. The boy's younger than the last, but wealthier. His mother wants assurances. Dowry? She wants land, the orchard and the northern mill. Says the steward. That's steep. She says the girl's worth it. Silence follows. Then someone laughs. You crawl out of the passage slowly, hands shaking. Not because you're afraid. No. Because you're angry. The kind of cold, sharp anger that sticks in your throat like a swallowed stone. You're not a girl. You're a transaction. And now you have proof. Back in your chamber, Helda notices your mood immediately. You look like you swallowed vinegar. I heard them, you say flatly. She doesn't pretend to misunderstand. Well, she says, that's earlier than most find out. Later she brings you a cup of hot milk with honey. You don't drink it. You're busy writing names into your secret book. The boy's name, his mother's, the land they want, the land they'll never get if you have anything to say about it. You realise something important that day. Information is your currency. So you start collecting more. You map out the hidden passages. You record who walks where, when, and with whom. You learn which maid carries notes between the steward and your father's captain. You watch who leaves the kitchens after dark. You start piecing together the castle like a puzzle no one else can solve, and you use it. When your father casually mentions the orchard at dinner, you smile sweetly and say, "But isn't that where the bees are hibernating? If we gave that up, we'd lose the honey supply for all of Lent." You don't sound accusatory, you sound thoughtful. He blinks, considers, and changes the subject. Small victories, but they count. The court begins to notice your mind. Carefully, warily. You're praised for being sharp, but not too often. You're called precocious, which is court language for a little unsettling. One priest tells your mother he's worried you read too much. She responds by ordering you 3 new books, in Latin, and the next time a suitor is mentioned within earshot, you're ready. The fringe fact: some noble girls in the later medieval period were actively taught to listen without being seen. Not just etiquette, but covert observation. There were even informal traditions where grandmothers would teach daughters and granddaughters how to read lips from across the feast hall. The unofficial art of quiet power. You wonder what your grandmother would have taught you, had she lived. Helda says she was the kind of woman who made kings uncomfortable just by sipping wine. You like that image. One afternoon, wandering the hidden corridors, you come across something strange. A sealed wooden door with no handle on your side. The air around it feels colder, and the stone floor is wet like someone's poured water through the cracks. You knock once, nothing. You knock again, still nothing. Hulda tells you later that door leads to the old priest's quarters. He went mad, she says. started seeing things, wrote numbers on the walls, said a girl with silver eyes was going to curse the house. You raise your eyebrows. He was wrong, of course, she adds with a smirk. You say nothing, but later in your book you write silver eyes, curse the house. You don't have silver eyes, but you like the idea of becoming a curse, the kind that isn't easily forgotten. A few days later, a servant finds you in the garden reading aloud to the pigeons. She laughs and calls you odd. You don't mind. You are odd. Odd is useful. Odd is underestimated. And when you overhear that your betrothal meeting is set for the end of the month, you do not cry. You write a letter. Not to the boy, to his mother. It's unsigned, of course, but it contains 3 very specific facts: the amount of honey your orchard produces annually, the suspicious fire at the Northern Mill 5 years ago, and a pointed suggestion that your family's finances may be slightly more precarious than they appear. You leave it where you know her lady's maid will find it. The match is quietly cancelled. No one speaks of it. But your mother gives you a long, unreadable look at breakfast the next day. Then she says, "Perhaps you do read too much." You smile, sip your tea, then excuse yourself for embroidery, but you don't go to the solar. You go back to the secret passages, of course, because the next thing you need is leverage. You never meant to meet the falconer's boy. He's just there one morning, standing barefoot in the dew-wet grass beside the mews, holding a leather gauntlet and looking like he was carved out of tree bark and bad decisions. His tunic is too short, his hair is a mess, and his hands are covered in something that might be blood, but you're told it's just mouse. You're here because the steward ordered you to observe the hawks, part of your ongoing education in courtly skills. Falconry is noble, he said, elegant, a fine pastime for young ladies of status, and frankly, less political than embroidery, since your last-ditch project turned out to be a rather alarming scene of a woman standing triumphant over a burning castle. So here you are, standing at the edge of the mews trying not to step in feathers, when the boy turns and says, "You're the princess, aren't you?" You blink. Technically. He grins. You don't look like one. You're not sure if that's an insult or a compliment. And you don't look like a falconer. I'm not. I'm his son, and he's drunk in the hayloft. Well, that clears that up. His name is Emmerich. He's 12, or so he says. Tall for his age, with a grin that's all teeth and no apology. He doesn't bow. He doesn't even lower his voice. But what he does do is make a sharp whistle, lift his arm and summon a hawk out of the air like a magician. The bird lands on his gauntlet, clicks its beak and flares its wings. You're impressed. You try not to show it. He glances at you. Want to try? You hesitate. If your mother knew, she'd faint. If your father knew, he'd probably laugh until he remembered you're not supposed to touch anything sharp. And Hulda? Well, Hulda might just help you do it anyway, so you nod. Teach me. And just like that, the falconer's boy becomes your favourite mistake. You start sneaking out at dawn, wrapped in a cloak too big for your frame, boots barely laced, hair hastily pinned under a scarf. You meet him by the kennels, then slip into the mews where the birds are still sleepy and the world hasn't quite started yet. He teaches you how to hold your arm just right, how to stay still, how to keep your eyes on the bird's eyes. There's a language to it. Whistles, clicks, hand gestures. You memorize it fast. You fly a kestrel first, smaller, lighter, but fierce. It cuts through the air like a knife and comes back to you with a kind of grace you've never been allowed to have. See, Emmerich says, you're a natural. You shrug, but your smile gives you away. The days stretch on, and your lessons become a secret. A new one. Something that belongs only to you, and to him. You don't talk much, not at first, but slowly, the silences between you fill with stories. He tells you about growing up in the stables, about his mother who died giving birth to his younger sister, about the time he broke his arm falling from the Dovecote Tower and had to set it himself, because no one noticed he was missing. You tell him about your lessons, The politics, the expectations, the whispers you overhear through the walls. You don't say everything, but you say enough. And one morning, sitting on a crate while he teaches you how to whistle properly, you look at him and realise he's the first person in years who doesn't want anything from you. Not status, not gold, not marriage. He just wants you to hold still so the hawk doesn't tear off your ear. Refreshing, really. Of course it can't last, you know this. There's a scholarly debate about whether noble girls in the Middle Ages had meaningful friendships with commoners, or if such stories are just romantic legends told by bored monks and modern writers with too much imagination. Some letters from the 14th century suggest it happened, secretly, quietly, but no one wrote those friendships into the official histories. Still, here you are, a secret, a quiet one, and it gets more dangerous every day, because it's not just birds now, it's closeness. One morning you brush his hand when he passes you the glove and neither of you moves away. Another time he calls you by your name, just your name without the lady in front, and it hits you like a slap and a kiss at the same time. He starts showing up with little things, a carved feather, a polished stone. Once, a tiny silver ring he claims he found under the hay. You know he stole it. You wear it anyway. One night Halda catches you sneaking back in, boots muddy, face flushed. She doesn't ask where you were, she just says, "If you get caught, you'll lose more than your slippers." You nod. Then ask if she knows how to clean hawk droppings out of wool. She sighs. "You're your grandmother all over again." You don't know what that means, but it makes you proud. The thing about flying birds is that it teaches you a kind of hunger, a yearning for air and space and wildness that doesn't quite fit inside castle walls. Every time the hawk launches from your arm, you watch it go with envy. One morning after a particularly sharp dive, Emmerich says, "Ever wonder what it's like to just leave?" Constantly. He smiles, but it's a sad one. You could, just walk out, be someone else. You stare at him and he doesn't mean it. Not really. Or maybe he does, but you can't. You're not free. You're not anonymous. You're a girl with a dozen names, each more gilded than the last, and you're watched even when no one's in the room. Still, the idea lingers, like feathers in your hair. The fringe fact. Some noble girls who went missing in the medieval period weren't kidnapped or murdered. They ran, disappeared, changed names, married into obscurity. A few were caught, a few were killed, but a few, just a few, became legends. You've read the tales, you've marked the pages, but those girls didn't have kingdoms depending on their marriages. You do, so you stay, but you still fly, in your own way. And one day, when Emmerich places a new hawk on your arm, a big one with mottled feathers and eyes like amber fire, you feel something spark under your ribs. "You're getting good at this," he says. You meet his eyes and reply, "I have to."
Because one day it might be more than a bird you have to train. It might be a husband, a court, a country, and you'll need a falconer's precision to survive them. It's your first funeral. Not your own, obviously, although that's always a possibility in your line of work. No, this one's for a boy you were supposed to marry. Remember him? Alaric, the walnut boy. He dies suddenly, some kind of fever. You're told it was fast and merciful, which really just means he screamed for a day and a half before his lungs gave out. You hear that part from one of the kitchen boys who traded a basket of pears for a story from a traveling physician. You don't cry, you're not entirely sure why. Maybe it's because you never really liked him. Maybe it's because you never really knew him. Or maybe it's because something deep in your chest says, that could have been you. There's a service, not in your castle, but in the chapel of his family's estate, a half-day's ride away. You're sent, of course. It would be inappropriate for you not to go. He was once your betrothed, and now he's a symbol. A lesson. A warning wrapped in white linen and myrrh. You're given a new gown for the occasion, gray with silver trim. Mourning colors, but still flattering. Because even in grief, there are eyes on you. Always. The trip is silent. Your carriage sways gently, wheels groaning beneath the weight of velvet and expectation. Halda rides beside you, knitting something complicated and refusing to look out the window. What was he like, you ask softly. She shrugs. He had nice boots. Fair enough. When you arrive, the boy's mother greets you like someone auditioning for sainthood. Eyes puffy, voice trembling just the right amount. She insists on holding your hand and calling you dear child, as if you hadn't already been dismissed once for being too politically inconvenient. The funeral is cold, literally and otherwise. The chapel is a narrow building of damp stone and high arches. The priest's voice echoes in a language no one really understands anymore. You're seated up front, hands folded in your lap like a sculpture, pretending to pray while actually watching everyone else. You notice who cries real tears and who keeps checking to make sure they're being seen crying. You count the noblemen in the corner, quietly talking behind their hands. You notice the girl in the green veil, his sister maybe, who's staring at the coffin like she wants to scream but doesn't know how. And then there's the body. You're not supposed to look directly, but of course you do. He doesn't look like Alaric anymore. He looks like a wax figure left too close to a fire. Pale, flattened, still. Someone tells you later he was buried with a ring meant for you. You don't know whether to feel honored or haunted. There's a wake after the service, because even medieval grief comes with wine and spiced meat pies. The adults drink, gossip, and pretend to be devastated while negotiating land swaps and marriage prospects. You linger near the fire, watching it all unfold like a tapestry that just won't lie flat. Then you hear your name. They're talking about you. Of course they are. One noblewoman says she pities you. Another says, well, at least she's back on the market. Your mother's voice cuts through the room like a dagger wrapped in silk. My daughter mourns with grace. She understands her duty. You don't, actually. Not entirely. But you're starting to. There's a fringe belief from the Alps, still whispered in certain old circles, that when someone dies after being betrothed, their soul lingers, not at the grave, but in the house of their intended, watching, waiting, making sure they're remembered. Some say a betrothal unfulfilled ties the dead to the living like an unfinished thread in a tapestry. That night, back in your chamber, you hear something shift near the window. Just a curtain. Just the wind. Probably. Still, you light a candle and whisper, we weren't in love, but I would have tried to be kind. The flame flutters. The next morning, your mother gives you a brooch in the shape of a lily. For remembrance, she says, pinning it to your cloak. Wear it. Not forever, just long enough to be seen doing it. You nod. Then you go outside to meet Halda, who's waiting near the courtyard. Let me guess, she says. You were a vision of tasteful grief. I was a lesson in mourning etiquette. Excellent! We wouldn't want anyone to forget you're marriageable. You walk in silence for a moment, passing a row of frozen rose bushes. Then Halda says, he's lucky. You blink. What? He died before becoming a tool. You laugh. It's a dark, bitter sound, but it feels good in your throat. Later that day, you return to the mews. Emmerich is there, mending a perch with his sleeves rolled up and a smear of something suspicious on his cheek. He looks up. You survived the funeral, then. Barely. He studies your gray gown. You look like a dove trying to blend in with the crows. You smile. I am a crow. I've just been wearing dove feathers. You spend the afternoon in silence, flying birds, a kestrel first, then a heavier falcon with eyes like gold coins. Emmerich doesn't ask questions. He doesn't offer pity. He just hands you the gauntlet and lets you stand in the wind until your arms ache and your chest stops feeling tight. That night you write a single line in your secret book. He died before I had to lie to him. You pause, then you underline it, twice. There's a strange kind of power in seeing death that close and still being expected to smile. A strange kind of clarity. You understand now why so many queens are stone-faced, why so many princesses in stories lose their hearts before they lose their thrones. And you understand finally that your grief, whatever shape it takes, is not really yours. It's a performance, a requirement, another step in the dance. But still, you choose your own choreography. When you wake the next morning, you pin the lily brooch to your gown. Then you wear it sideways, just enough to irritate the court painter. Your next betrothal is arranged before the snow even melts. It comes wrapped in honeyed phrases like opportunity and strategic alliance, but what it really means is that a man twice your age, with 2 adult sons, and a limp from a long-forgotten war, now technically owns your future. He's called Lord Renaud of Olene, a baron with considerable land holdings, a fine reputation, and a face that makes statues look expressive. His letters arrive on thick vellum, sealed in deep green wax. You're given one to read, to familiarize yourself with his tone. You open it carefully. Inside, a beautifully composed note. To the Lady of Worth and Wisdom, I anticipate with honor the day our houses are joined in strength. Until then, may your health and studies be ever flourishing. You close it. It's a fine letter. Too fine. It's the literary equivalent of watching someone curtsy without bending their knees. Your mother beams. Your father says, "This one is solid, loyal to the crown, respected, and not prone to drama." You, naturally, assume this means he will not die dramatically before the wedding. Halda reads the letter upside down, scoffs, and mutters, "He writes like a man with dry soup for blood." And that, tragically, becomes your first impression of your future husband. You're 10 now, which in royal daughter years is about 17. Old enough to know what a political marriage looks like. Old enough to know what it feels like to be given away strategically, like surplus grain. But not old enough to have a say. They begin preparing you at once. The dressmakers arrive before dawn to measure you again, like you've somehow grown 3 inches overnight. The court herbalist creates a new skin tonic to preserve your bloom. You are told to smile more often and to show interest in poetry, horses, and older men. Some women find maturity appealing, your mother says over breakfast. You stare at her. What about their teeth falling out and their inability to climb stairs? She doesn't answer. Instead, she arranges a portrait sitting. Yes, it's time to immortalize your betrothal look. You are painted in creams and golds, sitting stiff-backed in a carved chair while the court artist sighs dramatically and tells you to think serene thoughts. You think about the mice in the granary, the ones that ate your embroidery last year. You think they had the right idea. The painter decides your expression is perfectly noble. The final portrait shows a girl who doesn't look like you at all. Her hair is brighter, her eyes more distant, her expression bland and beautiful, like she's waiting to be transported somewhere in a silk-lined box. You look at the painting and realize, this is who you have to become, but not entirely. That's when you get the idea. If this marriage is inevitable, you might as well learn how to survive it, before you're trapped in a strange house with a strange man and no allies. So you start asking questions. Discreetly, of course. You approach the court librarian and request documents about the region of Olene, trade routes, agricultural reports, climate records. You accidentally spill a cup of cider on a tapestry depicting Lord Renaud's house crest, just so the steward will explain what the symbols mean. A stoat and a sickle, in case you're wondering. Very charming. You learn that his land produces grain, honey, and goats. You learn that his household is run by a stern sister who's rumored to speak to crows. You learn that his first wife died of a sudden illness after the birth of their second child, and that the servants still whisper about it. That part makes you pause. So you go to Halda. Was it poison? You ask. She raises an eyebrow. Officially? No. Unofficially? She was too clever and too bored. You nod, noted. You memorize the names of his sons, both older than you, one married, one still living at home. You find out what kind of dog he keeps, a mastiff, what he eats, mutton mostly, and what color he wears to court. Gray, always gray. You're building a map. A way through the future, quietly. There's a debate among historians about how much say noble girls had in their marriages. Some claim they occasionally wielded influence through a particularly doting father or a politically savvy mother. Others insist their preferences were noted and then entirely ignored. You're not sure where you fall on that spectrum, but you do know this. Knowledge is a form of resistance. The more you know, the less likely you are to be caught by surprise. And just when you think the plans are final, sealed, set in gold leaf and wax. Something shifts. It's a letter, delivered by hand. Not to your parents, to you. The seal is broken, not unusual. All your letters are opened before you see them. But this one smells like sandalwood and rain. Inside, lady. I have recently returned from pilgrimage and received news of our arrangement. While I do not believe in extended correspondences before official vows, I believe some familiarity is wise. Do you enjoy falconry? There are excellent mews at Aulen. If you are so inclined, we may fly birds together one day. There's no signature, just the initials, R of A. You blink, then read it again. You're unsure what to make of it. It's not romantic, not warm, but it's curious. Familiarity is wise. That's practically an invitation to engage, not just obey. You don't tell anyone about the letter. You write back instead. Lord Renaud, I do enjoy falconry. I've recently trained a peregrine with good instincts but a dramatic streak. It sometimes returns with the wrong prey. Perhaps we will compare birds one day. You don't sign it with your full name. Just Lady of the North Tower. Because if he knows anything, he'll know where the birds fly best. You leave the note with Halda. She doesn't ask what's inside. Just says, "Would you like it to smell like rose or ash?" You choose ash. That night, you look at the wedding dress designs laid out on your bed, silk, pearl, velvet, and you feel the shape of the future pressing in. But you also feel something else. The faintest pull of control. You are still a girl, still a pawn. But perhaps you've just learned how to tilt the board. You leave before sunrise, bundled in fur and silk, head heavy beneath a veil of pearls. Your breath fogs the carriage window as you watch the castle fade into the mist behind you. It's not farewell, just transit. A formal visit, they say. A betrothed bride sent to grow familiar with her future home. A soft test run, except nothing about this feels soft. The carriage rocks over rutted roads. Your trunks are packed with all the essentials. 4 gowns, 3 veils, 2 books, 1 very reluctant chaperone. Your mother kisses your forehead with a little too much ceremony. Your father doesn't come down to see you off. That somehow hurts more than you expect. Halda, of course, travels with you. She sits beside you, knitting something gray and practical. Every time you look at her, she pretends she's not watching you sideways. How far is Aulen exactly? You ask after an hour of silence. Far enough, she says, not looking up. There's a fringe superstition that noble brides should weep before crossing into their husbands' lands, to spill the sorrow early. You don't. You just keep one hand clenched around the edge of your cloak and watch the horizon. By midday, the landscape changes. The trees grow closer together, and the hills turn from soft slopes into jagged ridges. Everything here smells of pine and damp stone. And when you finally see the towers of Aulen rise in the distance, dark, square, less elegant than your family's spires, you feel a strange flutter in your chest. This is the place where your life may get very small, or very, very large. At the gates, you're greeted by a small welcoming party. No trumpets, no banners, just a steward, 3 stiff-looking maids, and an old woman with a carved cane, and a gaze that could shatter mirrors. Lady Alicia, she says, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. You blink. I'm sorry? I run this house. She doesn't smile. You will be respectful, clean, and useful. Not necessarily in that order. This is Lord Renaud's sister. You recognize her name from your research. She once ran a monastery. She now runs everything else. You give a perfect curtsy. She doesn't respond. Just turns on her heel and hobbles back into the keep. Halda whispers, "Charming woman. I can see why she never married." You spend the first night in a guest chamber that smells like dried mint and regret. The fire is already lit, the bed made, your things unpacked with surgical precision. Someone has even placed your favorite tea on the side table. You're not sure how they knew. You're both touched and slightly unnerved. Dinner is a quiet affair. No Lord Renaud. He's away on business, Lady Alicia says without looking up from her plate. He'll return before the week's end. You nod, trying not to seem disappointed or relieved. You're not entirely sure which you feel. Afterward, you're shown to the library. It's small, but rich. Books bound in leather, parchment scrolls, an entire shelf dedicated to falconry. You feel your shoulders relax for the first time since crossing the border. You find an atlas and lose yourself in the pages for over an hour. Halda doesn't even pretend to scold you. The next few days pass in a blur of rehearsals. Yes, rehearsals. That's what it feels like. You're paraded through gardens, shown the kitchens, asked to observe the chapel service, and nod appreciatively. You meet the steward, the house priest, the cook, who gives you a lemon tart and a meaningful look, and a cluster of wide-eyed servants who bow so low they nearly tip over. They're all polite, curious, watching. The unspoken question, what kind of lady will you be? You're already composing the answer in gestures, smiling just enough, speaking gently, showing you can read Latin and pick herbs, proving that you're more than just a title. You're a presence. You start walking the grounds in the early morning, alone except for Halda trailing behind, pretending she's not bodyguarding you with every step. You take note of the layout: stables to the west, falcon mews on the ridge, river winding just beyond the orchard line. You memorize it all. You find a hidden stairwell in the old chapel, leading to a crumbling turret with a perfect view of the southern road. You claim it immediately. It becomes your escape hatch, your lookout post, your breath of air when the walls of the keep press too close. And still, no Lord Renault. On the 5th day, a rider arrives. Not him. A letter. Lady, I am detained 2 more days. Unexpected matters with the western vassals. Please consider this delay a sign of trust. I do not rush our future, nor your introduction to it. There's a line beneath, in a different hand. P.S. The old falcon is nesting again. She still bites. You smile. Just a little. But here's the twist. The delay gives you power. With Renault absent, the court of Olens starts leaning toward you. You're a mystery, a presence, and people begin to speak to you like a figure of future authority. You use it. You ask questions, gentle ones. How often is the land taxed? When was the last famine? What crops grow best here? You speak with the midwife, the stable hands, even the beekeeper, who insists the honey this year will be unusually sharp. You nod, ask about trade partners, and file everything away. And then, of course, there's the hawks. You finally visit the mews. The falconer here is older, more formal than Emmerich. He shows you the birds one by one, like relics. But when you ask if you can hold the female peregrine, the old biter, he hesitates. She doesn't tolerate strangers. I'm not a stranger. He raises an eyebrow but hands you the gauntlet. The bird lands on your arm, heavy and proud, her feathers the color of storm clouds. She blinks once, then settles. The falconer stares. You glance at him. She knows who's watching. You return to your guest chambers with the smell of leather and feathers clinging to your sleeves. That night, you dream of flying. There's a fringe theory, utter nonsense most would say, that women who handle hawks too often become wild, that it stirs something in the blood, an old instinct, a freedom too big to fit inside silk bodices and formal bows. You hope it's true, and then, on the 6th day, he arrives. You're standing in the herb garden when you hear the hooves. You turn slowly. Lord Renault is exactly as described. Tall, weathered, broad-shouldered, a face carved more by war than laughter. And those eyes, gray and unreadable. He dismounts with practiced grace and strides toward you. No flourish, no smile, just a polite incline of the head. My lady, he says, you've grown taller than your portrait. And you've grown quieter than your letters, you reply. A pause, then just the faintest hint of a smirk. Well, he says, we'll have to balance each other then. Your heart does not flutter, it considers it. And that's enough, for now. The wedding ceremony is set for spring, but the night they expect you to prove it happens comes in winter. No one explains this, not directly. You are not handed a pamphlet titled, Your Public Humiliation, a Royal Checklist. But you know. Oh, you know. Because for the last week, every conversation, every gesture, every sideways glance from Lady Alicia has been preparing you for it. The quiet dread wrapped in silk and tradition, the spectacle after the vows. Here's how it works, in case you've been lucky enough to avoid it. A noble marriage must not only be witnessed, it must be consummated, or at least, it must be seen to be. And while the actual act is done in private, thank all the saints, what comes afterward is not. You've heard whispers from older girls. Some say the bed sheets are displayed, a ribbon of blood held up like a tournament flag. Others say the ladies-in-waiting are sent in directly after to inspect everything like critics at a gallery opening. And then there are the real horror stories, the ones where a midwife waits in the room. You try not to believe those. The day of the ceremony is cold and blue. A late snow falls gently on the garden paths, coating the rose bushes in lace. The chapel is lit with tall beeswax candles, their flames fluttering against the stained glass saints who look down with the kind of judgment that burns through silk. You wear white, of course. Not because it's tradition, this is still centuries before that particular fashion fad takes over, but because it looks good in portraits and makes you seem innocent. The gown is heavy. Pearl embroidery, silver stitching, sleeves long enough to drown in. Your hair is braided and looped with thin golden ribbons, a circlet pressing just enough into your scalp to remind you of your place. Lord Renaud wears gray, again, though today it's a deeper, richer shade, like slate polished by rain. His cloak is lined with sable. His boots are perfectly clean, which seems both impossible and deeply suspicious. You exchange vows, quietly, with hands clasped and eyes locked just long enough to be convincing. He does not tremble. He does not smile. He does not claim you with a kiss in front of the crowd. Instead, he lifts your hand and presses a brief kiss to your knuckles. There is something elegant about the restraint. Afterward, there is a feast, roasted game, warm spiced wine, fruit tarts, honeyed almonds. You barely taste any of it. You sit between Renaud and his sister, who doesn't say a single word for 3 entire courses, and smile at every toast made in your honor. You dance once, just once, with your new husband. He moves stiffly, not unkindly, and says nothing as he leads you through the slow turns. His hands are warm through his gloves. His palm at your back is light but decisive, like he's guiding a horse. You wonder if he notices your hands are shaking. When the music ends, he leans down and says, "You are doing well." Is that a compliment or a weather report? He allows himself the smallest laugh. You file that away. And then, it's time. You are escorted to the chamber, not your usual guest room. This one is larger, warmer, with a fire already roaring, and the bed covered in embroidered linen and symbolic flowers you can't quite name. You're led inside with ceremony, like a bride being sacrificed to a particularly well-mannered dragon. Renaud enters a few moments later, his steps measured, his eyes unreadable. The door shuts, locks. You are alone. The silence stretches, then breaks. "I won't force this," he says. "You know that." You nod, slowly. "I know what's expected," you reply. He walks to the fire, stares into it for a long time, then calmly, "Would you like to stage it or not?" You turn to him fully. "Stage it?" He looks back, expression unreadable. It isn't uncommon. The scholar in your head perks up. You've read about this, actually. Quiet agreements, arrangements. A small cut on the thigh or the hand. A splash of red on the sheets. A satisfied steward and a relieved family, all none the wiser. You say, "Do you want to?" He studies you. Not cruelly, not even curiously, just carefully. Then, "I'm too old to pretend I enjoy terrifying girls." You release a breath you didn't know you were holding. There's a pause. Then you say, "A knife, then?" "Hidden in the nightstand," he says without missing a beat. It is, wrapped in linen, clean, sharp. You press the blade to your thigh and wince, just enough to leave a mark. You've had worse injuries falling in the orchard. He turns away while you stain the sheet. When it's done, you lie back on the bed and look at the ceiling, blood trickling slowly along your leg. Your heart is loud. Not with fear, with relief. Renaud kneels beside the bed, not in devotion, in routine. He dips the sheet just enough, folds it, and nods once. I'll let them know. And then he leaves, just like that. You lie there, stunned, staring at the flickering shadows. So this is marriage. Not love, not cruelty, something stranger, something colder, but not entirely unkind. There's a scholarly debate, still ongoing, about whether non-consummated noble marriages were common in certain centuries. Most historians agree it happened, especially when one party was very young, or when politics required more show than reality. But the records are vague. The silences are louder than the entries. You now live in one of those silences. A private arrangement between two public figures. The next morning, you wake before dawn, still in the wedding gown, blood dried on your skin. Halda enters, sees the sheet, and says nothing. She leaves a basin of warm water and a fresh gown. You clean yourself, quietly, methodically. Later, the steward appears, offers congratulations, no hint of suspicion. And the castle carries on. No bells, no whispers, just the slow, careful march of politics. You write in your secret book that night, not all cages are locked. Some are made of agreement. And then you sleep, not easily, but deeply. Because now you know exactly what kind of marriage you've entered, and exactly how to survive it. Marriage, as it turns out, is not a crown. It's a title, a shift in grammar, a new seat at the table, and a subtle change in how people bow to you. But it doesn't come with power, not really, not yet. You are no longer Lady So-and-so. Now you are Lady Renaud. Or more insultingly in some circles, the Castellan's wife. Because Lord Renaud, it seems, is not currently living in a palace. He is governing a stone keep in the far west of his holdings, somewhere between a fortress and a sheep pen, and that's where you are now expected to reside. Not in his ancestral castle, not even in your childhood one, but here, a place where the hearth smokes constantly, where every corner leaks wind, and where the only view from your chamber is a courtyard full of chickens. You arrive with little ceremony, 3 wagons, 2 maids, Halda. Renaud rides ahead, offering to escort you personally, which is polite, if not exactly romantic. On the road, he speaks little, mostly issuing instructions to his men. You are given the middle horse of the escort formation, somewhere between honored guest and live cargo. He does ask once, "Are you warm enough?" You nod. As warm as one can be when being politely relocated to a rock? He smirks. Barely. That's become something of a language between you. When you arrive at the keep, the staff lines up to greet you. Not many of them, just enough to run the place. A cook, a steward, 2 old guards, and a maid who looks at you like she's already decided you'll cry by nightfall. You won't, of course. Not where anyone can see. Your new chamber is functional. A fireplace that works most of the time, a narrow bed with a lumpy mattress, and a window that creaks when the wind shifts. There's a tapestry above the hearth depicting a hunting scene, though one of the dogs looks more like a deformed goose. You decide to name him Sir Beacle. The keep is older than Renaud's primary estate. Built for defense, not beauty. The walls are thick, the staircase is narrow, and the corridors twist like someone lost track halfway through building and just kept going. You explore it anyway. You always do. You find the kitchens first, then the cellar, where wine barrels sit half empty, and the air smells of damp stone and secrets. You find a locked door behind the chapel, and make a note to ask Halda how to get it open. There's no library here. That stings a bit. But there is a solar with a writing desk, a battered copy of The Consolation of Philosophy, and a set of ink pots dried shut with age. You pry one open. You write a single word on a scrap of parchment, trapped. Then you cross it out, and write underneath, not yet. Renaud is often gone, inspecting roads, meeting with minor lords, handling what he calls border tensions, which you suspect means yelling at people about taxes and trying not to be stabbed over grazing disputes. He returns dusty and grim, eats little, and sleeps alone in the chamber across the hall from yours. No one speaks of the sleeping arrangement, least of all him. Instead, he treats you like a very polite roommate. He asks about your reading, asks if the cook is feeding you enough. Once brings you a small bolt of fabric, fine green wool from the northern market, and tells you it looked tolerable, which from him is basically poetry. You thank him, then ask if the green is for camouflage. He raises an eyebrow. Only if you plan to flee across a moor. You almost say, maybe I am. Instead, you smile and sew the wool into a shawl. The days are quiet, too quiet. Your mornings are spent in correspondence, writing letters you suspect no one actually reads. Your afternoons in needlework, or wandering the courtyard, or watching the cook yell at chickens. You ask if you can visit the local village. Renaud agrees, sends 2 guards with you. The village is small, muddy, and suspicious of silk. You walk the muddy road with your hood up, trying to blend in. Children gape. One boy runs after your horse and yells, "Are you a ghost?" You don't answer, but you smile. You visit the apothecary, a hunched man who smells like damp bark and has an impressive collection of dried frogs. He lets you buy rose petals, lavender, and powdered willow bark. You tell him you're making ink. He doesn't question it. Back at the keep, you turn the petals into perfume, the lavender into sachets, and the willow into tea. Halda watches silently. She's been even quieter than usual. You finally ask her, "Do you hate it here?" "No," she says. Pause. Then, "But I don't like watching you shrink." That catches you off guard. "Shrink?" you ask. She nods. "You're quieter. You walk like you're apologizing. You've stopped carrying that little dagger in your boot." You blink. "How did you know about the dagger?" She gives you a look that says please. You say nothing, just pull your shawl tighter. That night you go to the solar. Write in your book, "I am not shrinking, I am coiling." There's an old story in the region, Halda tells you while spinning wool, that a lady once lived in this keep, generations ago, who married the Castellan and then poisoned every one of his enemies with sugared almonds. She ruled for 10 years, barefoot, and supposedly kept a wolf as a pet. You ask if she's buried here. "No," Halda says. "Her body was thrown in the river. But her wolf is said to still haunt the western wall." You decide to make the wolf your unofficial spirit guide. Each night, you walk the keep. Quietly, soft steps, observing everything. You find a broken passage behind the pantry. You find a gap in the stones behind the chapel where light filters in. You find the chapel ledger, dusty and ignored, with lists of names that include more deaths than births. You write to your mother, ask for books, ask for paper, ask for wax seals and ink. She sends them, no questions. You start building something. Not just knowledge, not just plans, a kind of fortress inside yourself. You may be Lady Renaud now, Castellan's wife, distant daughter, groomed noblewoman, but you're still you, and whoever you are becoming needs room to grow. It takes a month before anyone at the keep realizes they've made a mistake. They think you're a delicate addition to Lord Renaud's house, a fine vase, dusted and displayed. They see the embroidery, the soft smiles, the polite nods at chapel. They assume you'll fade into the background like other ladies have, quiet, decorative, contained. They forget what happens when a princess gets bored. You don't rage, you reorganize, and it starts small. The first shift happens when the cook falls ill with a fever, and someone forgets to prepare the morning bread. The guards grumble, the servants panic. You step into the kitchen in slippers and fur-trimmed sleeves and say, "Flour is in the barrel, water's clean, we'll manage." They stare, but they obey. You pull up your sleeves, light the hearth, and knead dough like someone who grew up watching. Which you did. Halda's lessons weren't always in books. By midday, you fed the keep with warm flatbread and butter. Not elegant, but effective. By evening, words spread to the village that the lady cooked. The next morning, there's a basket outside your chamber, 3 duck eggs, 2 apples, and a very lumpy scarf. No note. You smile anyway. The second shift comes from the library, or lack thereof. The solar has a small shelf of books, mostly religious texts, a few dried-out chronicles, and a crumbling bestiary. You request more. Lord Renaud nods, distracted, and says he'll see to it. You don't wait. You write to your mother, then your cousin. then a bishop you once charmed at a feast by correcting his Latin. Within 2 weeks, books begin to arrive. Not many, but enough to build a real collection. Philosophy, medicine, history, trade law. You organize them in a new room, one unused since before your marriage. You order in candles, have a desk moved, a carpet laid. You don't call it a library, you call it your court. Because you're not just reading, you're listening. You invite the steward to discuss the harvest ledgers. You ask the stablemaster why the horses are thin. You meet the healer and request a list of supplies they're short on. At first, they come out of politeness, then they start seeking you out. Milady, the well in the east pasture's gone sour. Milady, the weavers say the wool is full of burrs this year. Milady, should we delay the barley order with the drought coming? They're not calling you girl anymore. And then comes the third shift, the official one. Renaud returns from a month at court, his boots dusted, his hair grayer than before, and finds that his wife is governing, not in title, not by law, but unmistakably, undeniably, in motion. He walks into your court, your newly formed solar library gathering place, and finds you mid-conversation with the steward about tariffs on imported salt. He says nothing, just waits. You finish your discussion, thank the steward, and turn. My lord, you say calmly, welcome home. There's a pause, then, you've been busy. You incline your head, only to keep boredom at bay. He walks the room, eyes the shelves, the ledgers, the organized stacks of parchment, the map with little inked flags marking the outlying farms. Then he says, you should have told me. You lift your chin slightly. Would you have listened? Another pause, longer this time. Then, surprisingly, probably not. You almost laugh. And that's when something shifts between you and your husband. Not love, not even affection, but understanding. From that day on, he begins inviting you to his meetings. Not often, not publicly, but enough. He asks your opinion about minor border disputes, about the new tax on bridge crossings, about whether it's worth investing in rebuilding the mill you both know is a money sink. You answer carefully, not because you doubt yourself, but because you know you're being tested. Men like Renaud don't give power. They yield it slowly, like blood from a tight wound. There's an open debate among scholars about noble women's roles in local governance during the medieval period. The official records mention little, but buried in letters and receipts are hints. Women who balanced accounts, arranged shipments, ran estates while husbands were at war. They were overlooked, but essential. You're not waiting to be overlooked. You're waiting to be indispensable. One morning, a problem arrives in the form of a messenger from the northern tenants. There's been a theft, grain missing, livestock unaccounted for, no clear culprit. Normally, this would be handled by a local reeve, but the reeve is biased, loyal to one side, possibly involved. You volunteer to go, and Renaud looks at you like you've just offered to fly there. You'll be cold. You'll be unwelcome. I'll be effective. He agrees. You ride out with 2 guards and Halda, bundled in wool and purpose. The tenants are skeptical, but you listen. You take notes. You walk the perimeter of the barns and check the locks yourself. It's not magic. It's math. The losses don't line up. The supposed thief has too little gain and no good motive. You return and recommend a change in oversight, quietly replacing the reeve with someone you trust. You don't accuse. You simply suggest. The thefts stop. After that, you start getting gifts again. A belt embroidered with tiny fish, a flask of cider, a poem written in appallingly bad verse tucked under your door. You keep them all, even the poem, because they're not just gifts, they're declarations. This lady is watching, and she listens. There's a fringe belief in a few obscure texts that the most dangerous kind of noblewoman is the one who seems agreeable, the one who plays by the rules long enough to rewrite them. You think about that as you sit in your court one quiet evening, mapping out next season's grain routes. You smile to yourself, let them keep underestimating you. After all, they've already given you the keys. Now you're just unlocking the doors. You've been writing letters again, not the polite, perfumed kind that get passed around at feasts and complimented for their penmanship. No, these are a different breed altogether. Lean, careful, laced with just enough truth to sting and just enough elegance to pass. These are letters with teeth. It begins when the steward mentions a neighboring lord who's delaying his debt to the keep. Only a few months behind, he says. He's always late. Renaud shrugs. Not worth stirring the pot. You, of course, stir it anyway. Not publicly. Not with swords or summons. Just with a letter. My lord, I know how difficult this year has been. The drought, the poor harvest, the loss of your second hunting hound. A tragedy. Still, you'll understand why it would trouble me personally to know our grain stores suffer while your hall holds feasts. Should I assume the barrels delivered were your offering to the poor, or may I expect the coin instead? You sign it Lady of Olen, and you add a pressed sprig of dried lavender. Because nothing confuses powerful men like being threatened by something that smells like a garden, the coin arrives within the week. Renaud reads the response and raises his eyebrows. You're better at this than I am, he says. You smile. I know. The next time it's a merchant, then a bishop's scribe, then the cousin of a minor baron whose sheep keep eating your border crops. One by one you write. One by one they respond. Your pen becomes a scalpel, sharp, quiet, bloodless, but not without consequence. You receive a reply one day that's not wrapped in velvet or parchment, but delivered in person. A man arrives in the rain, asking for a private audience with the lady of the letters. You receive him in the solar, your ink-stained fingers folded neatly in your lap. He's older, tired-looking. He smells like wet wool and panic. I only want to clarify, he says, shifting on his feet. The rumors about the letters, they are true? You tilt your head. What rumors? That you remember everything. You blink slowly, then smile. I do. He leaves with a visible tremor in his hand. You don't write his name down. You don't have to. But that evening, Halda says, You're making ripples. Just ripples? You ask. She shrugs. The kind that lead to waves. You start sleeping with a knife again. Not because you're afraid, but because you've become interesting. And interesting women tend to attract accidents. The fringe fact? Some women in medieval courts became notorious for their letters, not for writing love notes, but for controlling webs of influence. Whispers spread of ladies who could collapse a deal or end a feud with 3 sentences. No one could ever prove what was said, of course. But debts were paid, marriages were delayed, wars didn't happen, or did. You're starting to understand how that works. Your letters aren't just clever, they're tools. They shape the space around you, quiet and precise. But they also do something else. They let you build loyalty. You begin receiving unexpected messages. A maid in the kitchen sends you a note about a broken oven that the steward keeps ignoring. You write back, thank her, and have it fixed. A villager leaves a parcel of salted trout with a message scrawled into the wrapping. The new reeve is fair. Thank you. A girl from the weaving hall writes in smudged ink, I'm to be married to a man I don't trust. My mother says it's settled. What do I do? You don't have a perfect answer, but you write back anyway. Trust your fear, delay if you can. I will speak with your mother, you don't sign that one. But it's enough. The girl is still single 3 months later. You've created something accidental and dangerous. A network. Not spies, not informants, just people who know you see them. And that's power. Even Renaud starts taking notice. One evening, over the evening meal, he asks, Did you tell the alderman in Falas that his accounting records look like fiction? You sip your wine, not in so many words. He sent me 4 barrels of grain and a note that just said, She terrifies me. You smile sweetly. Then it worked. He studies you for a moment, then shakes his head, but he doesn't look angry. He looks relieved, because even he understands the quiet, clever wife is doing what even his title can't. You're making the keep run. You're making everything run. But it's not all letters and diplomacy. There's one you send that backfires. A minor noble whose son has been causing trouble, chasing servant girls, ducking debts, breaking furniture like it's his family hobby. You send a letter, direct and severe, suggesting he consider sending his boy to a monastery before someone breaks his nose. He responds with a challenge. Not to you, of course, to your husband. Renaud reads the letter aloud, then throws it into the fire. He wants a duel. You raise your eyebrows. Over a suggestion? He's a man of honor, Renaud says with a grim smile. Then why does he raise such dishonorable sons? That earns you a genuine laugh. Renaud does not duel. Instead, he rides out, speaks to the nobleman directly, and returns with a truce and 3 jars of wine-soaked cherries as a peace offering. You send a final note back, written in perfect court French. If your son is too young for war and too wild for books, consider falconry. A leash may teach him patience. No reply, just silence. Sometimes silence is enough. You start keeping a separate journal now. One for letters received, names mentioned, responses given. It's not espionage. Yet, but it's close. There's an old phrase Halda mutters now and then. A lady's ink is cleaner than her dagger, but cuts just the same. You like that one. One night, you sit by the fire, letter in hand, thinking about how far you've come. You write a single line in your book. Power is not in the crown, it's in the reply. Then you seal another envelope. Lavender scented, no signature, just a suggestion. And the first thread of your next plan. It begins with nausea. Not the dainty kind romantic ballads sigh over. This is the brutal, gut-punching kind that knocks you out of bed before dawn and leaves you curled on the stone floor, one hand gripping the chamber pot like it owes you rent. Halda finds you like that. She says nothing at first, just hands you a damp cloth and waits until your breathing steadies. Then, very softly, well, that explains the way you've been glaring at meat. You groan. Say it. She tilts her head. You're with child. You curl tighter into yourself. There. She said it. The thing is, you knew. Not consciously. But the clues had been stacking for weeks. The late cycle, the aversion to food, the sudden surges of emotion over completely mundane things, like watching a bird build a nest and sobbing because it's just so organized. And then there's the terrifying part. You haven't touched your husband. Not in that way. You sit up slowly, heart hammering. Renaud will think... Halda snorts. He's not stupid or cruel. You blink. You're very confident about that. She looks at you, serious now. I watched him stand guard outside your door after a storm, thinking you were afraid of thunder. He didn't knock, just waited. For 3 hours. You stare at the wall. It's a strange, complex thing. Realizing that a man can care about you in ways that don't include ownership. That he might protect you not out of duty, but choice. It doesn't make you love him, but it makes you respect him more than most kings. Still. He's going to have questions. You bathe, you dress, you sit at your desk and prepare to draft the strangest letter of your life. Except, Renaud is already waiting for you in the solar. He looks up when you enter, not alarmed. Not cold, just braced. I've heard, he says. You nod. I didn't mean for it to happen. He considers this, then, I know. Just like that. You blink. You don't think, no? Then who? He raises an eyebrow. I trust you. You've been here. I've been here. We both know. You nod again, but something behind your ribs unclenches. Then he adds, we'll say it's mine. That throws you. You want to claim it? He shrugs. The keep needs an heir. The court needs a reason to stop asking when we'll have one. This solves both. You stare at him. This is the kind of offer that can change lives. That has changed lives. In other stories, girls like you are ruined for less. Banished. Shamed. Locked in towers or shipped off to convents with only a wool blanket and a guilty midwife. But you? You're being offered protection, stability, a kind of loyalty that defies every rule they ever taught you about marriage. You finally find your voice. Why would you do that? Renaud looks at you for a long moment, then says, because you made this place worth living in again. You don't cry, but only because Halda walks in with a tray of broth and mutters, "If anyone's going to faint, do it on the rug. It's less valuable." There's a fringe theory in a half-forgotten physician's manual from the 1300s that claims a child conceived out of wedlock, but raised in nobility, develops a kind of dual spirit, half wild, half trained, capable of either saving a kingdom or burning it down. You clutch that theory like a talisman. The pregnancy is brutal. The nausea comes and goes like a tax collector, always at the worst times. Your ankles swell. Your moods swing like bells in wartime. One day, you throw an entire ledger across the room because the numbers felt smug. Your appetite is erratic. You crave apples, then cannot stand the sight of them. You demand sour plums in December. Halda just starts carrying salted nuts and dried cherries in her apron, like a priest carries holy water. Renaud grows quieter, but not distant. He walks with you through the halls when you can't sleep. He has a bench built beside your favorite window in the solar so you can rest your feet. He speaks little, but listens more. When you ask him what his sons will say, he simply says, "They'll understand." You don't know if that's true, but you let it be true for now. You write to your mother. Not about the real circumstances, just the official story. She sends a gift, a blanket woven with lions and lilies. Your father sends nothing. You're not surprised. In the second month, you begin stitching, not because you care about needlework again, but because your hands need something to do. You embroider birds, not gentle doves or dainty finches, hawks, eagles, owls, birds that bite. You write letters too. Fewer threats, more inquiries. You request a midwife from the capital, not because you doubt the local one, but because you want someone loyal to you in the room when the time comes. You begin preparing for battle, quietly, patiently. In the fourth month, the court sends word. The queen has heard of your blessed condition. She invites you to visit once the child is born. This is not a request. It's a royal command with gold leaf on the seal. You read it, pass it to Renaud, and say, "They want to see if it looks like you." He doesn't flinch. He just says, "Then we'll dress it in armor." You don't know if it will be a boy or a girl. You don't care. But you do know this. It will grow up knowing exactly how the world works, and exactly how to navigate it. There's a moment, late one night, when you sit alone in the solar. A storm is rising outside, wind clawing at the shutters. Your hand rests on your stomach. You feel a flutter, barely more than a whisper. You whisper back, "I don't care what the bards say. I'll write your story myself." You write in your secret book, "I will not be a saint. I will be a mother," and that is harder. Then you close the book, and you begin to plan, not just for the birth, but for the world your child will walk into. A world where they know they are more than a surname, more than a claim, more than a secret. A world where they are born not out of mistake or shame, but choice, yours. And that makes all the difference. The midwife arrives in the 6th month. She's older than you expected. Narrow-eyed, wrapped in layers of wool and confidence, with silver hair pinned into a braid that could probably be used to whip a horse. Her name is Dame Isenda, and she smells like iron and rosemary. When she walks into the keep, even the guards straighten without being told. She unpacks her tools in silence. Cloths, flasks, dried roots, something that looks suspiciously like a saw, and a pair of long iron pincers with curves like a bird's beak. Halda looks at them, winces, and mutters, "Oh, that's cheerful." You try not to throw up just from looking. Isenda gives you a long, flat look. "First child?" You nod. "Good," she says. "Means you're still scared." She doesn't coddle. She doesn't sing lullabies or rub your belly with oils while whispering about the miracle of life. She teaches you to breathe in patterns, how to roll a linen wrap just so, and how to identify when a cramp means nothing and when it means the world is ending. She's not warm, but she's honest, and you trust her. Renaud watches her like a hawk for the first 2 days. Then, seeing she's not about to sell you to traveling bandits or bleed you for parts, he retreats into his usual pattern of occasional silence and strategic support. "Do we trust her?" he asks one evening. "She told me if I die, she'll cut the baby out with her bare hands." He raises his eyebrows. Comforting. Oddly, yes. Your belly grows. The keep adjusts. Benches appear along the corridors. Meals are tailored. Every single servant adopts a slightly exaggerated bow whenever you pass, like you might break if someone breathes too loudly. You begin to wobble. You begin to curse at stairs. You write less now, but when you do, your words are sharper. Letters to the capital still go out monthly, flawless, elegant, deliberate. You're crafting a narrative. The Lady of Olen, graceful, intelligent, fruitful. No mention of technicalities, no mention of quiet, mutual secrets or iron tools that haunt your dreams. Just progress. But privately, in your secret book, you write, I am not bearing a child. I am forging an heir. There's a fringe superstition among some midwives that pain during pregnancy means the child will be clever. If that's true, yours is destined to outwit saints. The pressure in your spine feels like someone's been storing bricks in there. You learn to stand carefully, to walk slowly, and to smile through grinding teeth. Halda keeps a vial of peppermint oil on hand. She rubs it on your temples when the headaches start. It's like carrying a small judgmental kingdom, you mutter one evening. She laughs. Well, you've always liked power. You write letters to the child, too. You never sign them. They're tucked inside the pages of your secret book, sealed with plain wax. You imagine one day slipping them into a drawer they'll open by accident, or stuffing them into a traveling bag when they ride off to become whatever impossible thing you'll raise them to be. Letter Y? If they call you illegitimate, ask them who made the rules. Letter 2, learn to read, then learn what not to write down. Letter 3, you are not a piece on a board, you are the hand. And then one morning, the pains shift. It's early. The fire hasn't been lit yet. Your breath clouds in the air as you sit up and feel something inside you clench like a fist. Not the usual ache, not the slow stretch. This is different. You press a hand to your stomach. Halda is already at your side. It's time, she says. No, you whisper, not yet, it's early. But the pains come again, closer now. You're only in your 7th month. Isenda is summoned. The keep shifts into a quiet panic. Renaud is sent for, but no one knows where he's gone. He left on a brief inspection 2 days ago and hasn't returned. You are brought to the birthing room. It's dim, warm, already scented with sage and wine. The linens are clean. The basin is full. Halda takes your hand. Isenda ties her apron with a grim nod. I've brought breech babies out of worse, she mutters. But if you want to pray, now's the time. You don't pray. You growl. The pain is like being turned inside out by fire. It isn't beautiful. It isn't holy. It's raw. It's wet. It's animal. You forget how to speak. Your body is no longer yours. It's a battlefield, and you're both the fortress and the siege. There's blood. Too much. Voices echo, but none of them make sense. Isenda barks orders. Halda curses. Someone is crying. It might be you. Time becomes strange, elastic. Your mind drifts. You think of falcons, of secret stairwells, of lavender-scented ink and swords disguised as words. Then, suddenly, silence. A cry. Sharp, angry, alive. And then Isenda says, you have a son. You don't feel joy, you feel relief. They place him in your arms, red and squirming and loud. You stare at him. He does not look noble. He looks like a furious turnip, but he's yours. Halda leans over and mutters, a good pair of lungs. You'll never lose him in a crowd. You laugh. Just once. Then promptly pass out. You wake to find Renaud sitting beside the bed. He looks exhausted, dusty, like he rode all night. Did I miss it? He asks. You nod. He looks like you, Halda says, stubborn and unimpressed. You hold the child again, this time without fear. Renaud stands and says, we'll say he was born on the full moon. We'll say he came right on time. You meet his eyes. Thank you. He just nods, then looks at the baby and says, welcome to the war. You name him quietly, not after a saint, not after a king. You name him after a story. A name from a tale Halda once told, about a boy raised by wolves who grew up to tame monsters. No one argues, no one dares. You write in your secret book that night. He is not a compromise, he is a beginning, and you believe it, because now the stakes have changed. This isn't just about survival anymore. This is about legacy, and you intend to shape it yourself. Your son is barely the size of a loaf of bread, red-faced and furious at the air, but already the castle bends around him like he's its new son. Every chamber echoes with footsteps, softened by caution. Doors close quieter. Voices drop an octave. Even the chickens in the courtyard seem to cluck more respectfully. You name him Talon, not the soft name your mother suggested, not the holy one the priest offered. You choose something sharp, something primal. You want the world to remember it's not dealing with a feathered dove. He sleeps in your chamber at first, in a cradle carved by the steward's brother, who worked all night shaping the wood into swirling leaves and stars. You run your hand over the edge sometimes, still stunned that something so small could command so much attention. Halda says it's the first cradle she's ever liked. Looks like a coffin for a prince who'll never stay dead. You decide that's a compliment. Renaud visits often, though never for long. He holds the boy with awkward gentleness, like someone handling sacred texts, written in a language he barely speaks. But he does speak, softly, to the child, in gravel-toned fragments. You'll eat better than I did. You'll keep both hands. You'll be better. That one lands heavy. You say nothing, but you hear it echo in your bones. And here's where things get strange. Because while the castle coos and offers boiled cloths and linen and plum preserves for the mother's strength, outside your walls, the world is watching. It starts with letters. The queen sends a congratulatory message on parchment thick enough to be used as armor. It's sealed with 3 layers of wax and the royal crest. The crown rejoices in your fortune. It reads and looks forward to knowing this child as a future pillar of our realm. Which is code for, we've heard, we're interested, we're watching. Next comes a request for a painted likeness of the boy, not a sketch, a likeness. You have to sit with him wrapped in green velvet, while the painter, a nervous, twitchy man from the coast, fusses with light and frowns at Talon's squirming. He doesn't look noble enough, he mutters. Halda throws a spoon at him. The final painting shows Talon, with improbably golden hair, and a beatific expression that has never once crossed his actual face. But it gets sent to court anyway, alongside a lock of hair, a jar of plum paste, and an exquisitely worded letter describing the birth in poetic terms that leave out the blood, the screaming, and the terrifying silence that followed before that first gasp. You are rewriting history before it even settles. You begin to receive inquiries. Marriage offers, already. Some are veiled as trade agreements. Others come with miniature trinkets, a ring sized for an infant, a small embroidered boot, a feather from a rare eastern bird. One duchess sends a folded poem and writes, "We must connect our houses through futures unshaped." You burn the poem. Not because it's threatening, because it's presumptuous. There's a historical debate, of course there is, about how early noble children were promised. Some records claim girls were betrothed in the cradle, boys not long after. Others suggest that early betrothals were more fantasy than fact, a way to show interest but not truly lock in fate. You're not interested in either. Talon is not a pawn, he is your lover, and you begin to use him. Your letters now carry his name. Your requests are cloaked in motherhood, for his future, for his stability, for the child's comfort. When you ask for more grain from the eastern barons, you mention that Talon is beginning to eat solids, and surely deserves the finest barley. It works. 2 wagons arrive. When you ask the local bishop for additional coin to repair the schoolhouse, you remind him that a future ruler ought to read more than scripture. He sends not just coin, but 2 scribes. You write a note to the queen herself requesting any books fit for a growing mind. She replies with a single sentence. I suspect he already has one. You're becoming a figure. Not just the Castellan's wife, not just the quiet princess in exile, but his mother. And that carries weight. You hold court again, your version of it. This time with Talon asleep in a basket beside you, wrapped in wool and snoring like an overfed kitten. While the steward reads harvest reports, you rub the baby's back absently, When the guards report a dispute at the northern bridge, you bounce him gently as you issue your verdict. They all listen more carefully now, because you are no longer one woman, you are two, one breathing, one building. The fringe belief this time? In some villages, they say a woman who survives childbirth gains a second soul. One to protect her, one to fight for her, one to remember the pain so she can use it as armor. You don't feel doubled, you feel focused. Talon grows, fast. His eyes open wider, his fists clench harder. He starts tracking light, then faces, then your voice. You sing to him, not lullabies, but old ballads about queens who drowned kings and sisters who turned into swans. He gurgles at the swan part. Halda insists he's going to be a fire starter. You just wrap him tighter and write another letter, to your mother this time. You ask for a sword, not a decorative one, not a gift for show, a real one, child-sized. It arrives 2 weeks later, hidden in the folds of a bolt of velvet. No note, just the steel. You hang it above Talon's cradle. Renaud walks in one night, sees it, and says nothing. Just nods. He's said little since the birth, but you've caught him watching the boy. Not with awe, not with fear, with calculation. The kind that comes from wondering what kind of world this child will walk into, and what kind of woman his mother will be when he does. You write in your secret book that night. They wanted a princess to marry. They got a woman who gave birth to thunder. And then you draw a line. Under it, you add, he will not beg to exist. He will command it. And you sleep. Not long, not well. But you sleep as someone no longer waiting to matter, because now you have a legacy. And it has your eyes. Talon is 7 months old when the gossip reaches you. It arrives not as a letter, but as a whisper, carried on the wind through servants' mouths. The way all meaningful things travel in keeps like this. Halda hears it first, while passing the stables, where 2 maids are pretending to argue over laundry, but are really dissecting the latest scandal. They say the baby was born too early. Too small, too fast. They're counting the months. And the queen is listening. Halda brings it to you like it's a poisoned fruit. You peel the news apart slowly. You knew this would happen, she says. You did. Of course you did. Royal courts are machines powered by gossip. They don't run on facts. They run on feeling. And what the court is feeling now, apparently, is suspicious. You keep your face composed. You're very good at that. They're trying to guess, you say softly, to weigh the story against the silence. They don't have to be right, Halda says. They just have to sound convincing. You nod, stare out the window. Talon is outside with Renaud, who's holding him like he's afraid of being chewed on again. The boy has recently grown teeth. Very small, very sharp. You're proud. But now, this. You spend the evening rereading letters, cross-referencing dates, adjusting the timeline. You're not trying to lie exactly. You're clarifying history, massaging it into shape like dough. A gentle stretch here, a subtle omission there. It's a skill. The next day, you sit in the solar, Talon in his basket beside you, and begin rewriting the official story. It will go to the capital via trusted courier, a new account for the record keepers. You explain that Talon was born during a night of storm and confusion, earlier than expected, but not by much. You include a description of the blood moon that rose, an exaggeration, but poetic, and mention 3 reputable witnesses, all of whom have reason to stay loyal to you. You stop just short of swearing on saints. You send it sealed with green wax, the color of balance, of spring, of life, and you wait. In the meantime, the court gossips more. This time not just about you. Now it's poems. You get the first one folded inside a ledger, as if the steward didn't know what to do with it. It's written in delicate script, unsigned. Your son is a mirror. Too clean, too bright. To reflect a war-born night, you laugh out loud. The steward flinches. A few days later, another appears in your sewing basket. Heir in name, heir in lie. Born of moon or stable boy's eye? You burn that one. Then send a very subtle letter to the court's poetry circle, requesting new compositions, celebrating the nobility of unlikely births. 3 arrive the following week. 1 is so flattering, you keep it in your pocket to reread when Talon has been screaming for an hour. Because here's the thing they don't understand. You don't fear gossip. You study it. It's like weather, changeable, dangerous, but predictable once you learn the clouds. You begin to categorize the types of whispers. Gossip type 1, predictive. These are the ones that guess at futures. Who Talon will marry, whether he'll inherit the keep, whether Renaud will claim him as heir formally, or whether you'll send the boy to a monastery when he turns 6. These are harmless mostly. People need to dream aloud. Gossip type 2, protective. These are muttered by people who want you to survive. The ones who say, she's clever, that one, or she knew how to play the game. They're defending you with words sharpened by envy. Useful. Watch them. Gossip type 3, poison. These are crafted, planted, curated, like bad wine. The ones that come from powerful mouths behind polite smiles. These are the ones that can end marriages, end treaties, end lives. The queen, of course, is type 3. You begin watching her letters more closely. They arrive every 2 weeks, never early, never late. Always written by a hand you don't recognize, but stamped with her seal. They never say exactly what they mean. That's how you know they're dangerous. How fortunate that your son favors the House of Lorraine so clearly. Isn't it remarkable that Lord Renaud claims such joy in the boy's presence? It warms my heart to see your family thriving in this new chapter. Each sentence is a knife wearing perfume. Renaud reads them and scowls. You read them and smile. She wants me to flinch, you say. Halda frowns. And what do? Wait until she blinks. You don't respond publicly to the queen. That would be too obvious. Instead, you start dropping rumors of your own. Not through letters, through gifts. You send honey to a baroness whose nephew sits on the queen's advisory board. You include a note. May sweetness silence the bitter. You send plum preserves to a minor court poet known for romantic ballads. Tucked into the jar's wax is a little riddle. What's red, golden, and born without shame? He publishes a new verse a week later. In the west was born a storm-born flame, untouched by lies, untouched by blame. Poets, so easy, the queen will never accuse you outright. She's too smart for that. But she wants the court to doubt. Wants to see if she can move you like a piece on a board. She doesn't realize you're already the hand playing the game. There's an obscure historical theory that noble women who became mothers gained invisible rank, a kind of whispered reverence that didn't show in official hierarchy, but was known behind closed doors. She has blood, people would say. She holds the future. You see it now. Guards step aside more quickly. Servants bow deeper. Even the steward pauses before disagreeing with you. Because now when you speak, it's not just you behind the words. It's legacy. Talon babbles nonsense from his perch in your lap while you negotiate the price of oats. He's a good negotiator, the merchant jokes. He's hungry, you say, and hungry men are persuasive. When the merchant laughs, you know the deal is yours. And so the keep runs, smoother than ever. You build lists, invent systems, create better inventory ledgers. You implement color-coded wax seals for correspondence. You start teaching Talon to hold a wooden spoon like a scepter. Halda watches you with the look of someone simultaneously proud and vaguely alarmed. You don't stop, do you? You glance at her. Should I? She shakes her head. Not now. Not ever. That night you write in your secret book. They can gossip about the blood. Let them. My son will write his own name into the dust of this century, and I will sharpen the pen. You tuck Talon into his cradle, sword still hanging overhead. Then you douse the candle, lie back on the bed, and smile. They think you're defending your reputation. But really, you're building a dynasty. When the letter arrives announcing the queen's visit, it is so heavily perfumed that Halda sneezes 5 times before she can read it aloud. You take it in your hands, hold it carefully, like it might bite, and skim the lines written in silk-thin script. The queen, in her infinite generosity and boundless curiosity, wishes to bless your household with her presence during her autumn progress through the western provinces. Her grace looks forward to meeting young Talon and witnessing the fruit of such noble lineage. Translation: She's coming to inspect the child herself. It was inevitable. You've spent the last year building a fortress of smiles and silk. But she's not here for smiles. She's coming for cracks. She wants to peer through the wallpaper, through your bones, through Talon's squishy little baby face, and find evidence. A royal visit is never just a visit. It's an audit. And this one is armed with hairpins and fan snaps sharp enough to draw blood. The castle erupts. The steward panics. The kitchen staff begins baking like the queen is bringing an army of starving monks. A courier rides out to order new rugs, fresh rushes, scented oils, flowers, paint. You just sit in the solar and watch the chaos. Halda brings you a cup of warm cider, grim as a grave. They'll turn this place upside down. They can try. You don't flinch. You prepare. First, you summon the painter, the same jittery man who painted Talon's earlier likeness, and demand a new portrait, this time with the boy standing, propped subtly by furniture, his little hand resting on a toy sword. You order a background of storm clouds and sunlight. Symbolism is everything. Then you commission music. A harpist, a flautist, a bard who can sing courtly songs without accidentally slipping in verses about adultery or goat theft. You bribe him with cherry wine and promise not to kill him if he misspeaks. And then the clothing. Talon gets a new gown of deep green, embroidered with the crest of your husband's house. You get a dress so stiff with pearls that it could stop an arrow. You plan to wear it like armor. Renaud, when told of the visit, sighs. Do I have to be here? Yes, you say. He looks out the window. I'd rather face a siege. You laugh. You are. He does stay, to his credit. He even gets a haircut and wears the good cloak with the silver clasp. Talon chews on it during the morning drills. No one stops him. And then, on a sharp, cloudless day, the queen arrives. Her entourage is the size of a small rebellion. 20 horses, 2 carriages, 16 guards in embroidered livery, 3 ladies in waiting, all draped in fabrics so delicate you feel like blinking near them might cause structural collapse. And her grace herself, wearing what must be 5 pounds of garnets, a crown built to withstand a storm, and a smile that could curdle wine. She steps down from her carriage slowly, gracefully, like a falcon settling onto a perch. You bow. She leans in and kisses the air near your cheek. How radiant you look, she says. And you reply, are the very vision of imperial health. Halda is behind you, trying not to snort. The queen tours the keep. Her eyes graze every tapestry, every servant, every corner where dust might be hiding. Then, finally, she meets Talon. You've positioned him perfectly. In the great hall, in his embroidered gown, sword nearby, cheeks flushed with a gentle rub of crushed rose petals. He coos on cue, holds her finger like a tiny diplomat. The queen studies him, her gaze lingers. You hold your breath, then she smiles. He has your eyes. She means it. She's seen the resemblance, and she sees enough of you in him to know she can't press further without risking a scandal of her own making. She can imply, she can gossip, but she cannot prove. You've made sure of that. Talon sneezes. The queen offers a kerchief embroidered with lilies. He grabs it and begins to chew. You pretend not to beam. There's a debate among historians about how much power queens actually held in these court inspections. Some argue they were purely ceremonial. Others point out the string of demotions, banishments, and strategic accidents that followed certain royal visits. But no one argues their presence was passive. This woman? She could crush reputations like walnuts. But you're not afraid. That night you host a feast. Lavender roasted duck, candied pears, spiced wine. Every surface glimmers. Every candle burns clean. The queen sits at the center, flanked by Renaud and a painfully attractive ambassador from the south, who has clearly been paid in compliments alone. You, of course, sit across from her. You meet her gaze, you toast her health, and you smile like the secret isn't already yours. She leans in during the dessert course and says, "He'll be formidable." You nod. He already is. And then, almost too softly to catch, your hands are on the reins now, but the court does not forget. You stir your wine, and neither do I. She sits back. The music plays, and that's the end of it. The queen departs the next morning, flanked by banners and dust. She leaves no condemnation, no hint of scandal. Just a tiny silver pin left on your dressing table in the shape of a lion with one broken fang. You stare at it for a long time. A warning? A compliment? A riddle? You decide. It's all three. You write in your secret book, she saw him, saw me, and blinked first. Then you add, the court is not a throne. It is a stage. And now they know I can act. You spend the day in the solar with Talon on your lap, reading him a story about a girl who tricked a king into naming her his heir by pretending to be his jester. He babbles approvingly. He has no idea what's been won for him. But one day he will. It rains for 3 days after the queen departs. Not the soft, romantic drizzle that inspires poets and ducklings. This is bone-deep, root-loosening rain, the kind that turns roads into soup and courtyards into battlegrounds for half-drowned chickens. It drums against the stone walls of the keep like it's trying to wash history away. You stay mostly indoors, of course. The solar becomes your haven again, its hearth glowing, its walls thick with books and whispers. Talon plays on the carpet with carved wooden animals. He's begun to crawl with purpose now, which is slightly terrifying. He has the expression of someone planning a coup, even when he's just trying to reach a fallen spoon. Renaud watches him with a blend of awe and uncertainty. The man has negotiated border disputes and ridden through snowstorms, but put a drooling baby in front of him, and he stares like he's facing down a very tiny and emotionally unstable dragon. He keeps trying to eat my gloves, Renaud says one afternoon, lifting Talon gently off his lap as the boy lunges open-mouthed toward a leather gauntlet. I think he believes there's some kind of prey. He's learning to hunt, you reply, starting small. But the rain doesn't just flood the roads, it brings news. And this time, the news isn't wrapped in poetry or rumors. This time, it's urgent, wet, and delivered by a mud-streaked messenger who doesn't even bother with niceties. He just stumbles into the great hall, dripping and breathless, thrusts the scroll into Renaud's hands and mutters, "They're moving." The they in question? The neighboring House Velcour. You know the name. Everyone does. They've long been rivals, not openly at war, not exactly allies. You once called their lord a tax in human form. He'd never heard it, but it still felt good. Renaud unrolls the scroll, reads quickly, then hands it to you. The words are a firecracker in parchment form. Velcour has mobilized troops, not many. Not enough to call it war, but enough to matter, enough to raise eyebrows in the capital, enough to make small border lords pick sides. Why now, you ask? Renaud looks at Talon, who is currently trying to bite the ear off a wooden deer. You both know why. Because Talon exists. Because there's now a new piece on the board. You're not paranoid, you're strategic. Velcour has likely been waiting, watching. The Queen's visit might have confirmed their suspicions, or shaken their certainty just enough to act boldly. You pace the solar while the rain pounds outside. They want to test us, you say. See if we'll blink, if the keep is more decoration than fortress. They won't attack, Renaud says. They'll provoke. You say that like it's less dangerous. You summon the steward, the guard captain, the messenger. You gather reports, maps, weather patterns, food stores. You take over the great table in the hall, laying it out like a warboard. Renaud watches you work. He doesn't interfere. He knows better. You draft letters, one to your mother, one to the bishop, one, carefully coded, to the Queen. You don't accuse Velcour outright. You simply suggest a few unusual troop movements near contested lands. You mention the value of peace. You remind her that Talon, as Renaud's son, is now a vested interest of the crown. You sign it in your clearest, cleanest hand. No perfume this time, just truth. Halda brings you broth while you scribble out supply requests. Don't stay up too late, she says. I won't. You always do. She leaves. You write 3 more notes. That night, as Talon sleeps under the sword hanging above his cradle, you walk the battlements. The rain has stopped, but the mist lingers. The guards nod as you pass. One offers you a boiled egg. You decline. You're not afraid, but you're tuned. The whole world feels like it's holding its breath. There's a lesser-known theory in medieval circles that a castle isn't just stone and defense, it's memory. Every wall, every floorboard, holds the choices of those who lived there. You wonder what the keep remembers of you. You hope it remembers how you fought without shouting, how you built without a hammer. You return to the solar and find Renaud awake. He's sitting by the fire, sword on his knee, polishing it with the slow rhythm of someone who doesn't want to think. He'll be safe, you say. Renaud looks up. He will if we are. You both know what's coming. Not a war. Not yet. But politics sharpened into spears, allegiances shifting like tides, nobles testing their weight against yours. And at the center of it all, your son. You could run. You could disappear into some distant holding, live quiet, and let the names change around you while you cling to safety. But that's not who you are. You didn't survive this long to vanish, so you plan. The next day, you host a council. A small one, just your inner circle. Renaud, the steward, Halda, because no one dares leave her out, and the guard captain. You lay out the threat, the troop movements, the potential responses. And then you do something they don't expect. You propose an alliance, not with the capital, with the border lords, the ones caught between Velcour's pride and the queen's disinterest. They need a leader, you say, someone who's not playing court games. They won't follow a woman, the guard captain says. You look at him, then say, they'll follow a mother? Silence. Then Renaud, quietly. And the child? You smile. We show them his future. You begin crafting a speech. You commission a banner. Talon's name beneath your crest and Renaud's. You have small tokens made, coins stamped with his face, stylized and noble. You don't lie, you shape. You're not hiding anymore. Let Velcour provoke. Let the queen whisper. You're not the princess they expected. You're the storm they thought they could wait out. You write in your secret book. They sent letters. I sent legacy. Let them come. My child is not a scandal. He is a standard. And you sleep that night with the window open, letting the damp air in. No more hiding. The game has changed. You're not defending a name anymore. You're defining it. The first tapestry begins as a vanity project, a birthday gift for Talon's second year, something decorative to hang in the solar. You sketch it absently, one quiet evening, just a little scene of him toddling through the garden in his lopsided boots, chasing the chickens like a miniature warlord. But then you keep stitching, more than expected, more than necessary. The chicken becomes a falcon. The boots become armored greaves. The boy becomes taller, older, standing in a field of gold-threaded grain, sword in hand, head tilted slightly, ready. It takes you 3 months to finish. By then, it's no longer a keepsake. It's a message. Because here's the thing about tapestries. In court life, they're not just decorations. They're memory, encoded. Statements of status, symbols of legitimacy, warnings disguised as wool. Every stitch can mean something. Every color chosen with care. Gold for power, green for rebirth, red for blood, blue for royal claim. You make sure yours includes all of them. When you hang it in the Great Hall, no one says a word at first. Just slow nods, raised brows. The steward mutters, "Bit dramatic." But he doesn't take it down. Then the questions start. Is that meant to be young Lord Talon? He's so grown. Is that a sword, with his name etched on it? Yes, yes it is. You don't confirm it, of course. You just smile. And begin work on the next one. This one shows a falcon perched on a gloved hand. In the background, storm clouds. But above them, light, hope. As if the bird could see through the weather and know something better was coming. When it's finished, you send it as a gift. To one of the border lords who's been quietly resisting Velcour's influence. Thought you might need a new view, the note says. No signature. He hangs it in his own hall within a week. The queen hears. Of course she does. She sends a tapestry back, a lovely, sprawling scene of lilies and unicorns and children at play. At the center, a mother kneeling before a noble queen. A reminder, a dig. You hang it in the servants' hallway near the laundry. Talon uses it for hide and seek. In the quiet corners of the keep, people start whispering about the lady's threads. Some say they're prophecies, Others say they're coded messages. One of the guards insists your first tapestry shows the constellations in the hem of the tunic and starts mapping the stars every time Talon sneezes. The stories grow, you encourage them. Why not? Mystery is a kind of armor. Let them wonder if you're weaving truth into the walls. Let them squint at every stitch and ask themselves whether they're looking at the future. Because, in a way, they are. There's a long-standing academic debate about the role of noblewomen in medieval propaganda. Most scholars focus on letters, alliances, dowries. But a few fringe historians argue that needlework was political too, that tapestries served as visual manifestos, tools of influence sewn by hands no one suspected. You don't just believe it, you're living it, and then, one night, a visitor arrives. Uninvited, a noblewoman from Velcour's court, not a high one, not important enough to bring a title that requires official welcome, but high enough to enter under the veil of cordial curiosity. She wears crimson, a color that says, "I could draw blood and no one would question it." You receive her in the solar, offer tea, sit near the fire while Talon naps upstairs, his curls damp with sleep. She doesn't compliment the room, doesn't smile at your embroidery. She looks straight at you and says, "There are rumors that your son was born too soon." You stir your tea. "There are rumors that your house owes debts in the East," you say sweetly. She blinks. You sip. You don't deny it. You tilt your head. "I don't chase flies. I swat them." There's a moment of silence. Then she smiles, slow and sour. "You're bold." "No, I'm bored of games played by men who think their wives are scenery." The visitor shifts in her seat. "Velcour wants to be reassured. The child is legitimate. The court won't be embarrassed." You lean forward. "And what will Velcour do if he isn't reassured?" She says nothing. You smile wider. "Will he try to disinherit a boy who already has soldiers who would die for him? Will he challenge a child defended by the queen herself? Will he push so hard that he creates an enemy instead of an uncertainty?" Still silence. Then you deliver the real blow. "You tell Lord Velcour this. If he wants a seat at my son's table, he'd best stop trying to pull out the legs." The woman rises. "Strong words, my lady." You rise too. "Stronger thread." She departs, quickly. Halda steps into the room, having been eavesdropping from the corridor like a professional. "Do you think she'll carry that word back?" "I hope she will." That night, you begin a third tapestry. This one? This one shows a chessboard. One king fallen, one queen standing, a child in the center, hand on a pawn. You don't send it anywhere. You hang it over your desk, where Talon will see it when he's old enough to ask what the pieces mean. You'll tell him, but not yet. First, he must learn to thread his own needle, to speak the court's language without opening his mouth, to rule without ever being crowned. You write in your secret book. "They wanted to stain his name, so I sewed him a legend." Then you add, "and the pattern isn't finished yet." The first time Talon corrects you, he's 3.5. You're holding a scroll, reading aloud the tale of St. Alric and the Lion, an old favorite, full of miracles and improbable feline diplomacy. You embellish the lines a bit, as you always do. It's bedtime, and you're trying to make the story sound less like theology and more like a bedtime adventure. And then he interrupts. "That's not how the lion talks." You blink. "Oh?" He frowns, squinting in concentration. "He says, 'I will eat the wicked, but gently.'" You stare at him. That's disturbingly accurate. Talon grins, victorious. The next day, he insists on reading it himself, or rather, reciting from memory while holding the scroll upside down. The words come out garbled, confident, wild, and he makes the lion roar. Halda watches this with a look halfway between maternal joy and visible fear for the future. Where did he learn that voice? You shrug. Honestly, I think he was born with it. It's clear now. Talon is watching everything, mimicking everyone. He copies Renault's way of folding his hands behind his back. He parrots your speeches in miniature, striding through the halls, declaring proclamations about snack distribution and bath times. He refers to the family cat as my vassal. And the servants love it. Some bow to him as a joke. which only emboldens him. He begins holding court in the solar, with his stuffed animals arranged like advisors. He once fined a wooden rabbit for dereliction of duty. You don't correct him? Not much. Because here's the truth. He's already becoming the thing you built the keep for. A presence. A force. But with that rise comes questions. The Queen writes again. Her latest letter is sharper. She inquires about Talon's education, whether he's begun speaking informal dialect, whether his tutors include theology, military history, and rhetorical training. She ends with, the future of the realm depends not on strength, but on preparedness, which is her way of saying, shape him correctly, or the court will do it for you. You write back a week later, thank you for your concern. He has already memorized the vows of the Eastern Banner and can identify military formations in mosaic. His next lessons involve diplomacy, trade routes, and identifying when to feign ignorance for advantage. You add, as an afterthought. Also, he recently argued with a goat, and won. No reply. But you can feel her watching. And she's not the only one. The keep sees more visitors now. Nobles, advisors, ladies in finely embroidered veils who bring gifts for the boy, and stay just long enough to peer at him, to measure his jawline, to comment that he favors the old blood. You learn to spot the ones who are testing him, asking him strange questions, trying to provoke confusion or contradiction. One man asks him what honor means. Talon responds, when you keep your word even if it's boring. The man nearly chokes on his wine. You let the visitors come, and you let them leave with exactly the impression you want them to. Talon is not a cipher. He is not a ghost prince, raised in the shadows, his legitimacy hidden under layers of velvet and veils. He's real, loud, alive, brilliantly inconvenient, and unapologetically yours. There's a fringe theory, whispered, not widely accepted, that the children of politically embattled noblewomen often grew into more formidable rulers than their clean-blooded cousins. The reasoning? Exposure to court tension, female strategy, and an early understanding that survival is an art, not just an inheritance. You subscribe to that theory, wholeheartedly. You build Talon's days like a blueprint. Mornings with scribes, afternoons in the courtyard, sword in hand, smacking at targets made of bundled straw. Evenings with you, debating, storytelling, weaving philosophy into fables. He thinks bedtime stories are strategy sessions. And to be fair, they are. You teach him lessons through myths. When the prince turned his back on the farmer, the wolves took the field. When the queen asked questions instead of demanding answers, the city gave her its heart. When the knight ignored the baker's daughter, he starved during winter. He absorbs everything, and he begins asking his own questions. Will I be a prince? Not by title, you say, but by impact. Will I marry someone scary? You consider. Hopefully. Do I have enemies? You meet his eyes. Only if you matter. He processes that in silence, then nods. Renaud, for his part, watches the boy with quiet astonishment. He's more present than he used to be. You still don't share a bed, haven't for a long time, but there's a kind of camaraderie between you now, a shared guardianship, a mission. You find him and Talon sparring with wooden swords one evening. Talon hits him in the knee and declares victory. Renaud bows, exaggerated. I surrender to Lord Talon. No, the boy says. You surrender to the future. Halda nearly drops the stew pot laughing. There's no escaping it anymore. The court knows. The nobles know. You know. Talon is not just a child. He's a symbol. You can already see the people shifting around him, aligning themselves, waiting to see where he'll land, who he'll favor, who he'll cast aside. And it terrifies you, because symbols are fragile. They can be broken, stolen, twisted. So you begin to plan something else, something bigger than tapestries and guest lists. You begin creating the circle. It starts with 5 people, the steward, Halda, Renaud, the young tutor, and a carpenter named Lore, who knows every inch of the keep's foundation and once broke a baron's nose in defense of a kitchen girl. They meet in the solar after Talon's asleep. You speak plainly. We don't know what the future holds, but we know where the threats will come from. They nod. We don't need titles, you say. We need loyalty, strategy, skill. You make your intentions clear. Talon will grow under many eyes. The courts, the queens, the worlds. So you're building a shield around him, not one of steel, but of people. People who will teach him the truths the court won't. People who will watch and remember and act. And as they swear to serve, quietly, off the record, without pageantry, you write in your secret book. Every heir needs a crown, but a true ruler needs a circle. Then you close the book and begin the next chapter, because your son isn't a secret anymore. He's a story, and you're still the one holding the pen. The snow falls late this year. At first, it comes in soft flurries, like the sky is still making up its mind. But by the second week of winter, the whole world turns white. The trees bow, the rooftops vanish, the roads disappear beneath layers of silence. And the keep? It becomes a fortress in a snow globe. The stone walls trap warmth, fires burn constantly. Talon spends his mornings curled by the hearth, wrapped in fur, demanding more stories. He's 5 now, bigger, bolder, and beginning to suspect that most fairy tales are propaganda. That night didn't save anyone, he says one evening, halfway through a tale of dragons and damsels. The girl saved herself. He just showed up for the feast. You pause. That's a fair interpretation. He grins. I'm going to write a better one. You ruffle his curls. Good. Just make sure it has a moral. Oh, it will, he says very seriously. Don't wait for nights. He's going to be impossible to control, which is perfect, because the whispers are louder now. The Queen's letters come colder, shorter. The capital is stirring. You can feel it in the ink. There's been a shift, something subtle, like a wind changing direction. You hear it in the reports from your circle. One of the Queen's advisors has fallen ill, mysteriously. Another has resigned, though his estates were seized the same week. Velcourt has gone quiet. Too quiet. No skirmishes, no diplomats, just silence. The kind of silence you don't trust. Renaud grows restless. He sharpens his sword every evening, though no one's challenged him. He doesn't say it aloud, but you see it in the way he paces. Something's coming. You don't fear it, but you do prepare. You gather the circle again. You light a fire, unroll the maps, mark the names of allies, trace the likely path of the Queen's next move. She won't send an army, you say. Not yet. No, says Halda. You shake your head. Too dramatic, too risky. She'll try to cut us off first, politically, isolate us, make Talon look like a regional nuisance. She'll fail, says the steward. Yes, but only if we make her fail. So you act, not with swords, with scrolls. You write to every house that's benefited from your grain redistribution, every scholar whose monastery you funded, every knight who's been fed by your kitchens during winter patrols. You remind them who you are, who Talon is, and how many debts they owe. Quietly, of course. Lore the carpenter reinforces the keep's foundations, just in case. The tutor begins training Talon in subtext, how to read a letter and see what isn't written. You draft a plan for evacuation routes, not because you intend to run, but because you know that survival isn't cowardice. It's strategy. And through it all, you keep your posture perfect, because you are not a frightened girl anymore. You are the architect of a future the court didn't authorize. And on the coldest night of the year, it happens. An official envoy arrives from the capital, dressed in black with gold trim, the Queen's seal, 3 horses, 4 guards. They bring a letter and a summons. You read it aloud, slowly, as the snow swirls outside. The crown requests the presence of Lady Allen and her son Talon at court to confirm his noble standing and offer him appropriate placement within the royal structure. Translation: Bring the boy. Let us judge if he's real enough to tolerate, Renaud swears under his breath. Halda just mutters, Here we go. You fold the letter, then calmly say, We'll go. They stare at you. You look at Talon, now crouched behind the tapestry of the falcon, sword in hand, eavesdropping like a professional. He grins. Can I wear my boots with the dragons on them? Absolutely. You don't dress like a widow or a supplicant. You dress like a storm, pearl-threaded cloak, gloves stitched with your crest, Talon in green velvet, sword at his hip, chin high. Renault rides beside you, the circle behind. You don't arrive quietly. You arrive... The court stares. You let them. You walk through the halls of polished stone and golden light with your son at your side, steady and composed. And when you stand before the queen, her throne gilded, her gaze sharp, you bow only as much as protocol demands. She gestures to Talon. So, this is the child. You smile. No, Your Grace. This is the future. She studies him. Talon doesn't blink. He says, with devastating clarity, "Thank you for letting us visit your kingdom." Then adds, "We brought preserves." The queen smiles, just slightly. You don't speak again unless prompted, but you watch. You watch every courtier's face, every subtle shift, every angle of their ambition. And you see it, the fear, not of you exactly, but of what you've made. A boy not forged in the gilded womb of royal approval, but in the world's teeth. And he's magnificent. Later, when you're back in your guest chambers, Halda pours you wine. Renault leans against the window. That went better than expected. You nod. She'll let us stay. Not forever. Just enough. Enough for what? He asks. You smile. For roots. Because now, you're not just a mother. You're the founder of something far more dangerous than rebellion or rumor. A legacy. And as Talon sleeps beside the hearth, curled beneath a tapestry that now hangs in the royal palace, a new one you designed just for this occasion, you write in your secret book for the final time. They wanted a puppet. I gave them a prince. They wanted my silence. I gave them a story. And they will tell it in whispers for generations. Then you close the book and sleep, not as a princess, not even as a queen, but as something rarer, the woman who outlived the lie. So now, as the candles burn low and the shadows dance across stone walls softened by memory, you breathe. It's quiet here, finally. Talon sleeps beside the hearth again, this time without a sword, without declarations, without any sense of the storm he's been born through. He's just a boy now, peaceful, whole, unaware of how close history came to shaping him into something else. And you? You've done what very few ever manage in these high, gilded towers and cold stone halls. You outlived expectation. You weren't the fair princess in a tower, waiting for rescue. You weren't a pawn on the board. You weren't an ornament to diplomacy, a name on a betrothal scroll, or a womb in velvet. You were the architect. You fought wars no one sang about. You wrote your own myths in thread and ink. You carved out space where none was offered, loved a child into legend, and turned whispers into weapons. You didn't wear a crown. You didn't need one. Because the truth of medieval princess life, it wasn't all roses and tapestries and riding side saddle through flower-strewn fields. It was strategy. It was pain stitched into silence. It was raising children with wolves at the door and smiling like it was just the wind. But for you, for once, the story ends differently. Not in exile, not in martyrdom, but in a chair beside the fire, warm, whole, and still holding the pen. And maybe, just maybe, you'll live long enough to watch the court rewrite your story in their history books. Filtered, polished, harmless. Let them. You know the truth. And so does your son. Now close your eyes. You've earned this quiet. Tomorrow can be chaos. But tonight you rest.